minutes to set that bloody live up.
From a black market trader, but it was worth it. It was like drinking spring water. Gil forgot to close his mouth for a moment, and then recovered his composure. Major Ron can drink like a Pyretian, he said with a complimentary tone. So the Pyretians would like to think, Ron said. No, that's the business. Come this way, Gil said, and lumbered to his feet. Ron fell into step behind him, and Gil's 4 huge bodyguards moved in behind. Everyone in the bar watched them leave by the back door. On stage, the girl had just shed her final tiny garment and was in the process of twirling it around one finger prior to hurling it into the crowd. When she realized no one was watching, she stomped off in a huff. In a snowy alley behind the club, a grey, beetle-nosed, 6-wheeled truck was waiting. Hawkweed liquor, smokes, text slates with dirty pictures. Everything you asked for, Gil said expansively. You're a man of your word, Ron said. Oh, to the money. 2,000 Imperial credits. Don't waste my time with local rubbish. 2,000 Imperial. Ron nodded and clicked his fingers. Trooper Fagor stepped out of the shadows, carrying a bulging rucksack. My associate, Mr. Fagor, Ron said. Show him the stuff, Fagor. Fagor stood the rucksack down in the snow and opened it. He reached in and pulled out a las pistol. The first 2 shots hit Gil in the face and the chest, smashing him back down the alley. With practiced ease, Fagor grinned as he put an explosive blast in the skulls of each outraged bodyguard. Ron dashed over to the truck and climbed up into the cab. Let's go, he roared to Fagor, who scrambled up onto the side even as Ron threw it into gear and roared it out of the alley. As they screamed away...
Yo, Alvin, how is it going?
A big, dark shape dropped down into the truck, landing on the tarpaulin wrapped contraband in the flatbed. Fagor, hanging on tight, monkeying up the restraints onto the cargo bed, saw the stowaway and lashed out.
How you doing, man?
A powerful jab laid him out cold in the canvas folds of the tarpaulin.
You can't be chilling, dude.
Saw Fagor fall in the rear-view scope and panicked as the attacker swung into the cab beside him. Major, Korvac said. Korvac, Ron exploded. You! Here! I'd keep your eyes on the road if I were you, Korvac said, glancing back. I think Gil's men are after a word with you. The truck raced on down the snowy street. Behind it came 4 angry limousines. Theft, Major Ron said. 4. The big black staff
I appreciate it, dude.
down the boulevard under the glowing lamps and their ironwork frames. Smoothly and deftly, it slipped around the light evening traffic, changing lanes. Drivers seemed more than willing to give way to the big, sinister machine with its throaty engine note and its gleaming double-headed eagle crest. Behind armored glass in the tracked passenger section, Gaunt leaned forward in the studded leather seats and pressed the speaker switch. Beside him, Blenner poured 2 large snifters of brandy and chuckled. Milo, Gaunt said into the speaker, not so fast. I'd like to draw as little attention to ourselves as possible, and it doesn't help with you going for some new speed record. Understood, sir? Milo said over the speaker. Sitting forward astride the powerful nose section, Milo flexed his hands on the handlebar grips and grinned. The speed dropped a little. Gaunt ignored the glass Blenner was offering him and flipped open a data slate map of the city's street plan. Then he thumbed the speaker again. Next left, Milo, then follow the underpass to Zorn Square. But that takes us into the cold zones, Commissar, Milo replied over the link. You have your orders, Adjutant, Gaunt said simply, and snapped off the intercom. This isn't guard business at all, is it, old man? Blenner said right. Don't ask questions, and you won't have to lie later, Vay. In fact, keep out of sight and pretend you're not here. I'll get you back to the bar in an hour or so. I hope, Gaunt added under his breath. Ron threw the truck around a steep bend.
I have no idea.
Alarmingly on the wet snow. Behind it, the heavy pursuit vehicles thrashed and slipped.
As long as it takes, really.
We're going deeper into the damn cold zone. We don't have much choice, Korvac replied. They're boxing us in. Didn't you plan your escape route? Ron said nothing and concentrated on his driving. They were flung around another treacherous turn. What are you doing here? He asked Korvac at last. Just asking myself the same thing, Korvac reflected lightly. Well, truth is, I thought I'd do what any good regimental colonel does for his men on a shore leave rotation after a nightmare tour of duty in a hell pit like Fortis, and take a trip into the downtown districts to rustle up a little black market drink and the like. The men always appreciate a colonel who looks after them. Rowan scowled, fighting the wheel. Then I happened to see you and your
The moth
sidekick,
in your room.
and I realized that you were doing what any good
I don't like
sneaking
moths.
low-life weasel would do on shore leave rotation, to wit, scamming some local out of contraband so he can sell it to his comrades. So, I thought to myself, I'll join forces. Ron's got exactly what I'm after, and without my help, he'll be dead and floating down the River Cracia by dawn. Your help? Ron spat. The glass at the rear of the cab shattered suddenly.
Yo,
The bullets
Matt,
smacked.
how's it going?
Both men ducked. Yeah, Cormac said, pulling an auto pistol out of his coat. I'm a better shot than that Feth White Fagor. Cormac wound his door window down and leaned out, firing back a quick burst of heavy fire from the speeding truck. The front screen of one of the black vehicles exploded, and it skidded sharply, clipping one of its companions before
I don't
slamming into a
know.
wall and
Butterflies
spinning
are
out
evil
of the
buggers, dude. They
time,
might.
before coming to rest in a spray of glass and debris. I rest my case, Cormac said. There are still 3 of them out there, Ron said. True, Cormac said, loading a fresh clip. But, canny chap that I am, I thought of bringing spare ammo. Gaunt made Milo park the staff track around the corner from Needle Shadow Boulevard. He climbed out into the cold night. Stay here, he told Leonard, who waved back jovially from the cabin. And you, Gaunt told Milo, who was moving as if to follow him. Are you armed, sir? The boy asked. Gaunt realized he wasn't. He shook his head. Milo drew his silver Tanith dagger and passed it to the commissar. You can never be sure, he said simply. Gaunt nodded his thanks and moved on. The cold zones like this were a grim reminder that society in a vast city like Cracia was deeply stratified. At the heart were the great palace of the Ecclesiarch and the Needle itself. Around that, the city centre and the opulent, wealthy residential areas were patrolled, guarded, heated, and screened. Safe little microcosm.
Lovely love arts, dude. Thank you.
There, every benefit of imperial citizenship was enjoyed. But beyond, the bulk of the city was devoid of such luxuries. League after league of crumbling, decaying city blocks, buildings and tenements 1,000 years old, rotted on unlit, unheated, uncared for streets. Crime was right.
I think my plans are finish the armor tonight.
Their control
Um,
inner city limits. It was a human zoo.
Get some nice
Urban
details
world
done.
surrounded civilization. In
Still
some
not
ways,
decided on the
it was
bases
like
yet.
born to the Imperium itself. The opulent, luxurious heart surrounded by a terrible reality it knew precious little about, or cared to know. Light snow, too wet to settle, drifted down. The air was cold and moist. Gaunt strode down the littered pavement. 1034 Needle Shadow Boulevard was a dark, haunted relic. A single, dim light glowed on the 6th floor. Gaunt crept in. The foyer smelled of damp carpet.
Fair enough, my
There were
Swedish
no
friend.
lights, but he found the stairwell lit by hundreds of candles stuck in assorted bottles. The light was yellow and smoky. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, he could hear the music. Some kind of old dance hall ballad by the sound of it. The old recording crackled. It sounded like a ghost. 6th floor, the top flat. Shattered plaster littered the worn hall carpet. Somewhere in the shadows, vermin squeaked. The music was louder, murmuring from the room he was approaching on an old audio caster. The apartment door was ajar, and light, brighter than the hall candles, shone out. The violet glow of a self-powered portable field lamp. His fingers around the hilt of the knife in his greatcoat pocket. Gaunt entered. 5. The room was bare to the floorboards and the peeling paper. The audio caster was perched on top of a stack of old books, warbling softly. The lamp was in the corner, casting its spectral violet glow all around the room.
Yep, hey up, dude.
Is
Hey
there
up,
anyone
dude.
here? Gaunt asked, surprised at the sound of his own voice. A shadow moved in an adjoining bathroom. What's the word? It said. What? I haven't got time to humor you. The word. Eagle shot, Gaunt said, using the code word he and Ferret had shared years before on Passion 960. The figure seemed to relax. A shabby, elderly man in a dirty civilian suit entered the room so that Gaunt could see him. He was lowering a small, snub-nosed pistol of a type Gaunt wasn't familiar with. Gaunt's heart sank. It wasn't Ferret. "Who are you?" Gaunt asked. The man arched his eyebrows in reply. "Names are really quite inappropriate under these circumstances." "If you say so," Gaunt said. The man crossed to the audiocaster and keyed in a new track. Another old-fashioned tune. A jaunty love song full of promises, regrets. Started up with a flurry of strings and pipes. "I am a facilitator, a courier, and also very probably a dead man," the stranger told Gaunt. "Have you any idea of the scale and depth of this business?" Gaunt shrugged. "No. I'm not even sure what business you refer to, but I trust my old friend Ferret. That is enough for me. By his word, I have no illusions as to the seriousness of this matter. But as for the depth, the complexity," the man studied him. "The Navy's intelligence network has established a web of spy systems throughout the Sabbat worlds to watch over the crusade." "Indeed. I'm a part of that cobweb. So are you, if you but knew it. The truth we are uncovering is frightening. There is a grievous power struggle underway in the command echelon of this mighty crusade, my friend." Gaunt felt impatience rising in him. He hadn't come all this way to listen to arch speculation. "Why should I care? I'm not part of high command. Let them squabble and backstab, and would you throw it all away? A decade of liberation warfare? All of War Master Slado's victories?" "No," Gaunt admitted darkly. "The intrigue threatens everything. How can a crusade force this vast continue when its commanders are at each other's throats? And if we're fighting each other, how can we fight the foe?" "Why am I here?" Gaunt cut in flatly. "He said you would be cautious." "Who said? Ferret?" The man paused, but didn't reply directly. 2 nights ago, associates of mine here in Kracia intercepted a signal sent via an astropath from a scout ship in the Nubular Reach. It was destined for Lord High Militant General Drevier's fleet headquarters.
Yep,
Its
Sweden.
clearance level was vermilion. Gaunt blinked. Vermilion level. The man took a small crystal from his coat pocket and held it up so that it winked in the violet light. "The data is stored on this crystal. It took the lives of 2 psychers to capture the signal and transfer it to this. Revier must not get his hands on it." He held it out to Gaunt. Gaunt shrugged. "You're giving it to me." The man pursed his lips. "Since my network here on Kracia intercepted this, we've been taken apart. Revier's own counter-spy network is after us, desperate to retrieve the data. I have no one left to safeguard this. I contacted my off-world superior, and he told me to await a trusted ally. Whoever you are, friend, you are held in high regard. You are trusted. In this secret war, that means a lot." Gaunt took the crystal from the man's trembling fingers. He didn't quite know what to say. He didn't want this vile, vital thing anywhere near himself, but he was beginning to realize what might be at stake. The older man smiled at Gaunt. He began to say something. The wall behind him exploded in a firestorm of light and vaporizing bricks. 2 fierce blue beams of lasfire punched into the room and sliced the man into 3 distinct sections before he could move. 6. Gaunt dived for cover in the apartment doorway. He drew Myla's leg for what good that would do. Feet were thundering up the stairs. From his vantage point at the door, he watched as 2 armored troopers swung in through the exploded wall. They were big, clad in black insignia-less combat armor, carrying compact cut-down las rifles. Adhesion clamps on their knees and forearms showed how they had scaled the outside walls to blow their way in with a directional limpet mine. They surveyed the room, sweeping their green laser tagger beams. One spotted Gaunt prone in the doorway and opened fire. The blast punched through the doorframe, kicking up splinters, and began stitching along the plasterboard wall.
Yep,
Gaunt's
best
knife
mates, my
hit
dude.
He was dead. Dead unless the old man's pistol lay on the worn carpet under his nose. It must have skittered there when he was cut down. Gaunt grabbed it, thumbed off the safety, and rolled over to fire. The gun was small, but the odd design clearly marked it as an ancient priceless specialized weapon. It had a kick like a mule and a roar like a basilisk. The first shot surprised Gaunt as much as the two stealth troops, and it blew a hatch-sized hole in the wall. The second shot exploded one of the attackers. A little rune on the grip of the pistol had changed from 5 to 3. Gaunt sighed. This thing clearly wasn't overblessed with a capacious magazine. The footfalls on the stairway got louder, and 3 more stealth troopers stumbled up, wafting the candle flames as they ran. Gaunt dropped to a kneeling pose.
No, you're good, dude. You're good.
But the other 2 opened fire up the well with their las guns, and then the remaining trooper in the apartment behind him began firing too. The cross blast of 3 las guns on rapid bursts tore the top hallway to pieces. Gaunt dropped flat so hard he smashed his hand on the boards, and the gun pattered away down the top.
Welcome to the chat, whoever's
After a
watching.
moment or two, the firing stopped, and the attackers began to edge forward to inspect their kill. Dust and smoke drifted in the half-light. Some of the shots had punched up through the floor and carpet, a whisker from Gaunt's nose, leaving smoky, dimpled holes. But Gaunt was intact. When the trooper from the apartment poked his head round the door, a cubit of hard-flung Tanith silver impaled his skull.
I know, dude. It's mental.
Spasming. Gaunt leapt up. A second, 2 seconds, and he would have the fallen man's lasgun in his hands, ready to blast down the stairs. But the other 2 from below were in line of sight. There was a flash, and he realized their green laser taggers had swept over his face and dotted on his heart. There was a quick and frantic burst of lasgun fire, and a billow of noxious burning fumes washed up the stairs over Gaunt. Blenner climbed the stairs into view, carefully stepping over the smouldering bodies, a smoking las pistol in his hand. Got tired of waiting, the commissar sighed. Looks like you needed a hand anyway, Abraham. 7.
I'm small, dude. I've only
Grey
got
truck with its
154
single remaining
subs.
pursuer slammed into high gear as it went over the rise in the snowy road, leaving the ground for a stomach-shaking moment. What's that? Rawn said wildly, a moment after they landed again and the thrashing wheels re-engaged the slippery roadway. It's called a roadblock, I believe, Cormac said. Ahead, the cold zone street was closed by a row of oil can fires, concrete poles and wires.
True.
Several armed shapes were waiting for them. Off the road! Get off the road! Corbeck bawled. He leaned over and wrenched the crescent steering wheel. The truck slewed sideways in the slush and barreled beetle nose first through the sheet wood doors of an old, apparently abandoned warehouse. There, in the dripping darkness, it grumbled to a halt, its firing note choking away to a dull cough. Now what? Rawn hissed. Well, there's you, me, and Fagor, Corbeck began. Already the trooper was beginning to pull himself groggily up in the back. 3 of Gaunt's ghosts, the best damn fighting regiment in the Guard. We excel at stealth work and, look, we're here in a dark warehouse. Corbeck readied his automatic. Rawn pulled his las pistol and did the same. He grinned. Let's do it, he said. Years later, in the speakeasies and clubs of the Cretan cold zones, the story of the shootout at the old Vinci warehouse would do the rounds. Thousands of shots were heard, they say, mostly the bass chatter of the autogun sidearms carried by 20 armed men. Mob Overbaron Volner Hapshet Cal Giels, feared enforcers, who went in to smoke out the off-world gangsters. All 20 died.
Ah, nice. The A10
20
Warthog.
further shots, some from las pistols, some from a big-bore autogun were heard. No more, no less. No one ever saw the off-world gangsters again, or found the truck laden with stolen contraband that had sparked off the whole affair. The staff track whipped along down the cold zone street, heading back to the safety of the city core. In the back, Blenner poured another 2 measures of his expensive brandy. This time, Gaunt took the one offered and knocked it back. You don't have to tell me what's going on, Bram. Not if you don't want to. Gaunt sighed. If I had to, would you listen? Blenner chuckled. I'm loyal to the Emperor, Gaunt, and doubly loyal to my old friend. What else do you need to know? Gaunt smiled and held his glass out as Blenner refilled it. Nothing, I suppose. Blenner leaned forward, earnest for the first time in years. Look, Bram, I may seem like an old fogey to you, grown fat on the luxuries of having a damn near perfect regiment, but I haven't forgotten what the fire feels like. I haven't forgotten the reason I'm here. You can trust me to hell and back, and I'll be there for you. And the Emperor, Gaunt reminded him with a grin. And the bloody Emperor, Blenner said as they clinked glasses. I said, Blenner said a moment later, why is your boy slowing down? Milo pulled up, wary. The two tracked vehicles blocking the road ahead had their headlamps on full beam, but Milo could see that they were painted in the colours of the Jantine patricians. Large, shaven-headed figures, armed with batons and entrenching tools, were climbing out to meet them. Gaunt climbed out of the cabin as Milo brought them to a halt. Snow drifted down. He squinted at the men beyond the lights. Brockus, he hissed. Colonel Commissar Gaunt, replied Major Brockus of the Jantine patricians, stepping forward. He was stripped to his vest and oiled like a prize fighter. The wooden spoke in his hands slapped into a meaty palm. A reckoning, I think, he said. You and your scum boys cheated us of a victory on Fortis. You bastards. Playing at soldiers when the real thing was ready to take the day. You and your pathetic ghosts should have died on the wire where you belong.
Oh, God. Don't
That's
remind
not the
me.
real reason, is it, Brockus? Oh, you're still smarting over the stolen glory of Fortis, but that's not it. After all, why were you so unhappy we won the day back there? It's the old honor thing, isn't it? The old debt you and Flens still think has to be paid. You're fools. There's no honor in this. In backstreet murder out here, in the cold zones, where our bodies won't be reported for months. I don't believe you're in a position to argue, said Brockus. We of Jant will take our repayment in blood where it presents itself. Here is as good a place as any other. So you'd act with dishonor to avenge a slight to honor? Brockus, you ass! If you could only see the irony. There was no dishonor to begin with. I only corrected what was already at fault. You know where the real fault lies. All I did was expose the cowardice in the Jantine action. Bram, Blenner hissed in Gaunt's ear. You never were a diplomat. These men want blood. Insulting them isn't going to help their mood. I'm dealing with this, Vay, Gaunt said archly. No, you're not. I am. Blenner pushed Gaunt back and faced the Jantine mob. Major, if it's a fight you want, I won't disappoint you. A moment, please, Blenner said, holding up a finger. He turned to Milo and whispered, Boy, just how fast can you drive this buggy? Fast enough, Milo whispered, and I know exactly where to go. Blenner turned back to the patrician heavies in the lamplight and smiled. After due consultation with my colleagues, Major Brockus, I can now safely say, Burn in hell, you shit-eating dog! He leapt back aboard, pushing Gaunt into the cabin ahead of him. Milo had the staff track gunned and slewed around in a moment, even as the enraged troopers rushed them. Another 3 seconds and Gaunt's ride was roaring off down the snowy street at a dangerous velocity, the engines raging. Squabbling and cursing, Brockus and his men leapt into their own machines and gave chase. So glad I left that to you, Vay, Gaunt grinned. I don't think I would have been that diplomatic. 8. Trooper Bragg kissed his lucky dice and let all 3 of them fly. A cheer went up across the wagering room, and piles of chips were pushed his way. Go on, Bragg, Matt Larkin chuckled at his side. Do it again, you feathered old drunk. Bragg chuckled and scooped up the dice. This was the life, he thought. Far away from the war zone of Fortis, the mayhem and the death. Here in a smoke-filled dome in the cold zone back end of an ancient city. Him and his few true friends. A good number of pretty girls and wager tables open all night. Val was suddenly at his side. His intended friendly slap was hard and stinging. Val had still to get used to the cybernetic implant shoulder joint the medics had fitted him with on Fortis. The game can wait, Bragg. We've got business. Bragg and Larkin kissed their painted lady friends goodbye and followed Val out through the rear exit of the gaming club onto the boarding ramp. Suth was there. Melia, Merin, Kafran, Kurul, Kol, Baru, McCall, Raglon, almost 20 of the ghosts. What's going on? Bragg asked. Melia jerked his thumb down to where Corbeck, Rawn, and Fagor were unloading booze and smokes from a battered 6-wheeler. Colonel's got us some very tasty stuff to share, bless his Tanith heart. Very nice, Bragg said, licking his lips, not entirely sure why Rawn and Fagor looked so annoyed. Corbeck smiled up at them all. Get everyone out here. We're having a party, boys.
Oh no, not your right wing.
Cross. There was cheering and clapping. Val leapt down into the bay and opened a box with his Tanith knife.
Yeah, don't have your right wing
Bottles
shot
up,
off, dude.
clustered around. Hey! Raglan said suddenly, pointing out into the snowy darkness beyond the clubbed bay. Incoming! The staff track slid into the bay behind Corbeck's truck, and Gaunt leapt out. A cheer went up and somebody tossed him a bottle. Gaunt tore off the stopper and took a deep swig, before pointing back out into the darkness. That I could do with a hand, he began. Major Brockus leaned forward in the cab of his speeding staff track and looked through the screen where the wiper was slapping the snow away. Now we have him. He stopped at that place ahead.
Yeah, that's
Brockus flexed his
different.
hand and struck it with his baton. Then he saw the crowds of jeering ghosts around the drive-in bay. 100, 200. Oh, balls, he managed. The bar was almost empty, and it was nearly dawn. Ibram Gaunt sipped the last of his drink and eyed Vaynham Blenner, who was asleep face down on the bar beside him. Gaunt took out the crystal from the inside pocket where he had secreted it and tossed it up in his hand, once, twice. Corbeck was suddenly beside him. A long night, eh, Commissar? Gaunt looked at him, catching the crystal in a tight fist. Maybe the longest so far, Colum. I hear you had some fun. Aye, and at Ron's expense, you'll no doubt be pleased to hear. You want to tell me about what's going on? Gaunt smiled. I'd rather buy you a drink, he said, motioning to the weary barkeep. And yes, I'd love to tell you. And I will, when the time comes. Are you loyal, Colum Corbeck? Corbeck looked faintly hurt. To the Emperor I'd give my life, he said, without hesitating. Gaunt nodded. Me too. The path ahead may be truly hard, as long as I can count on you.
Fairs, dude, as long as
Corbeck
you're surviving.
said nothing, but held out his glass. Gaunt touched it with his own. There was a tiny chime. First and last, Corbeck said. Gaunt smiled softly. First and only, he replied. A memory. Manzipor, 30 years earlier. They had a house on the summit of Mount Reside, with long colonnades that overlooked the cataracts. The sky was golden until sunset, when it caught fire. Light bugs, heavy with pollen fibers, ambled through the warm air in the atrium each evening. Ibram imagined they were navigators, charting secret paths through the Empyrean, between the hidden torments of the warp. He played on the sun decks overlooking the mists of the deep cataract falls that thundered down into the 8-kilometer chasms of the northern rift. Sometimes from there, you could see fighting ships and Imperium cutters lifting or making planetfall at the great landing silos at the Natri fields. From this distance, they looked just like light bugs in the dark evening sky. Ibram would always point and declare his father was on one. His nurse and the old tutor Benflay always corrected him. They had no imagination. Benflay didn't even have any arms. He would point to the lights with his buzzing prosthetic limbs and patiently explain that if Ibram's father had been coming home, they would have had word in advance. But Auric, the cook from the kitchen block, had a broader mind. He would lift the boy in his meaty arms and point his nose to the sky to catch a glimpse of every ship and every shuttle. Ibram had a toy dreadnought that his uncle Dersius had carved for him from a hunk of plastine. Ibram would swoop it around in his hands as he hung from Auric's arms, dogfighting the lights in the sky. Auric had a huge lightning flash tattoo on his left forearm that fascinated Ibram. Imperial Guard, he would say, in answer to the child's questions. Jantine third for 8 years. Mark of honor. He never said much else. Every time he put the boy down and returned to the kitchens, Ibram wondered about the buzzing noise that came from under his long chef's overalls. It sounded just like the noise his tutor's arms made when they gestured. The night Uncle Dersius visited, it was without advance word of his coming. Auric had been playing with him on the sun decks, and had carved him a new frigate out of wood. When they heard Uncle Dersius's voice, Ibram had leapt down and run into the parlor. He hit against Dersius's uniformed legs like a meteor and hugged tight. Ibram, such a strong grip. Are you pleased to see your uncle, eh? Dersius looked 1,000 meters tall in his mauve Jantine uniform. He smiled down at the boy, but there was something sad in his eyes. Auric entered the room behind them, making apologies. "I must get back to the kitchen," he averred. Uncle Dersius did a strange thing. He crossed directly to Auric and embraced him. "Good to see you, old friend." "And you, sir?"
Yep, what about it,
"Been a
dude?
long time." "Have you brought me a toy, Uncle?" Ibrahim interrupted, shaking off the hand of his concerned-looking nurse. Dersius crossed back to him. "Would I let you down?" He chuckled. He pulled a signet ring off his left little finger and hugged Ibram to his side. "Know what this is? A ring. Smart boy."
Oh, all right.
It's more. Dersius carefully turned the milled edge of the ring.
Careful what you talk about on the
A thin,
live.
truncated
But
beam
yeah,
of
go
laser
ahead.
stabbed out. "Do you know what this is?" Ibrahim shook his head. "It's a key. Officers like me need a way to open certain secret dispatches, secret orders. You know what they are? My father told me. There are different codes. It's called security clearance." Dersius and the others laughed at the precocity of the little boy. But there was a false note in it. "You're right. Codes like Panther, Esculus,
Yeah, that's all right then.
or the old color code levels, cyan, scarlet. It goes up, magenta, obsidian, and vermilion," Dersius said, taking the ring off. "Generals like me are given these signet rings to open and decode them." "Does my father have one, Uncle?" A pause. "Of course." "Is my father coming home? Is he with you?" "Listen."
Damn, fair enough, dude.
This. Ibrahim
Fair
took the
enough.
ring and studied it. "Can I really have this, Uncle Dersius? Is it for me?" Ibrahim looked up suddenly from the ring in his hands and found that everyone was staring at him intently. "I didn't steal it," he announced. "Of course you can have it. It's yours," Dersius said, hunkering down by his side, looking as if he was preoccupied by something. "Listen, Ibrahim, there's something I have to tell you about your father." Part 5. The Imperium. 1. Gaunt had been talking to Ferret. They had sat by a fuel drum fire in the splintered shadows of a residence in the demilitarized zone of Passion 960's largest city. Ferret was disguised as a farm boss in the thick, red wool robes common to many on Passion, and he was talking obliquely about spy work, just the sort of half-complete, enticing remarks he liked to tease his commissar friend with. An unlikely pair, the commissar and the imperial spy, one tall, lean and blonde, the other compact and dark. Thrown together
Yeah,
by
just
the
be safe and
circumstances of
dude.
combat, they were bonded and loyal, despite the differences of their backgrounds and duties. Ferret's intelligence unit, working the city farms of Passion in deep cover, had revealed the foul Chaos cult and the heretic Navy officers in their thrall. A disastrous fleet action, brought in too hastily in response to Ferret's discovery, had led to open war on the planet itself and the deployment of the Guard. Chance had led Gaunt's Hyrkans to the raid which had rescued Ferret from the hands of the Passion traitors. Together, Gaunt and Ferret had unveiled and executed the traitor Baron Silag. They were talking about loyalty and treachery, and Ferret was saying how the vigilance of the Emperor's spy networks was the only thing that kept the private ambitions of various senior officers in check. But it was difficult for Gaunt to follow Ferret's words because his face kept changing.
Well,
Sometimes
can you hear it well, or
and then, in the flame light, his face would become that of Dersius, or Gaunt's father.
like how well can you hear it? I'm listening to Warhammer audio book. It's the Gaunt's Ghosts, first one. I thought I might as well start a series while I paint more of this up.
With a grunt, Gaunt realized he was dreaming, made his friend goodbye, and, dissatisfied, he awoke.
Indeed.
The air was unpleasantly stuffy and stale. His room was small, with a low, curved ceiling and inset lighting plates that he had turned down to their lowest setting before retiring. He got up and pulled on his clothes, scattered where he had left them. Breeches, dress shirt, boots, a short leather field jacket with a high collar embossed with interlocked imperial eagles. Firearm screening fields meant there was no bolt pistol in his holster on the door hook, but he took his Tanith knife. He opened the door hatch and stepped out into the long, dark space of the companionway. The air here was hot and stifling too, but it moved, wafted by the circulation systems under the black metal grill of the floor. A walk would do him good. It was night cycle, and the deck lamps were low. There was the ever-present murmur of the vast power plants and the resulting micro-vibration in every metal surface, even the air itself. Gaunt walked for 15 minutes or more in the silent passageways of the great structure, meeting no one. At a confluence of passageways, he entered the main spinal lift and keyed his passcode into the rune pad on the wall. There was an electronic moan as cycles set, and a 3-second chant sung by non-human throats to signal the start of the lift. The indicator light flicked slowly up 20 bas-relief glass runes on the polished brass board. Another burst of that soft, artificial choir. The doors opened. Gaunt stepped out into the glass bay, a dome of transparent, hyper-dense silica 100 meters in radius. It was the most serene place the structure offered. Beyond the glass, a magnificent, troubling vista swirled, filtered by special dampening fields. Darkness, striated light, blistering strands and filaments of colors he wasn't sure he could put a name to. Bands of light and dark, shifting past at an inhuman rate. The Imperium. Warp space. The dimension beyond reality through which this structure, the mass cargo conveyance Absalom, now moved. He had first seen the Absalom through the thick tinted ports of the shuttle that had brought him up to meet it in orbit. He was in awe of it. One of the ancient transport ships of the Adeptus Mechanicus, a veteran vessel. The tech lords of Mars had sent a massive retinue to aid the disaster at Fortis, and now, in gratitude for the liberation, they subordinated their vessels to the Imperial Guard. It was an honor to travel on the Absalom, Gaunt well knew, to be conveyed by the mysterious, secret carriers of the God Machine Cup. From the shuttle, he'd seen 16 solid kilometers of grey architecture, like a raked, streamlined cathedral, with the tiny lights of the troop transports flickering in and out of its open belly mouth. The crenellated surfaces and towers of the mighty Mechanicus ship were rich with bas-relief gargoyles, out of whose wide-fanged mouths the turrets of the sentry guns traversed and swung. Green interior light shone from thousands of slit windows. The pilot tug, obese and blackened with the scorch marks of its multiple attitude thrusters, bellied in the slow solar tides ahead of the transport vessel. Gaunt's flagship, the great frigate Navarre, had been seconded for picket duties to the Nublar Reach, so Gaunt had chosen to travel with his men on the Absalom. He missed the long, sleek, waspish lines of the Navarre, and he missed the crew, especially Executive Officer Kreff, who had tried so hard to accommodate the Commissar and his unruly men. The Absalom was a different breed of beast, a behemoth. Its echoing bulk capacity allowed it to carry 9 full regiments, including the Tanith, 4 divisions of the Jantine Patricians, and at least 3 mechanized battalions, including their many tanks and armored transport vehicles. Fat lift ships had hefted the numerous war machines up into the hold from the depots on Pyrites. Now they were en route, a 6-day jump to a cluster of war worlds called the Menazoid.
Mike, are you still here,
the
dude?
next defined line of battle in the Sabbat Worlds campaign. Gaunt hoped for deployment with the Ghosts into the main assault on Menazoid Sigma, the capital planet, where a large force of chaos was holding the line against a heavy Imperial advance. But there was also Menazoid Epsilon, the remote dark death world at the edge of the class. Gaunt knew that War Master Makaroth's planning staff were assessing the impact of that world. He knew some regimental units would be deployed to take it. No one wanted Epsilon. No one wanted to die. He looked up into the festering, fluctuating light of the Imperium beyond the glass and uttered a silent prayer to the
I think
Blessed
Mike might be
Emperor.
doing something.
Spare us from Epsilon. Other, even gloomier thoughts clouded his mind, like the infernal, invaluable crystal that had come into his hands on Pyrites. Its very presence, its unlockable secret, burned in the back of his mind like a melt-a-gun wound. No further word had come from Ferid. No signal. Not even a hint of what was expected of him. Was he to be a courier? If so, for how long? How would he know who to trust the precious jewel to when the time came?
So
Was
you
someone
asked
else
me
looking from him?
how
Had
much
some
for the
further vital
painting.
instruction failed to reach him?
How about
Their long
once
search
I've painted
aside,
it all,
Gaunt
we
cursed
can
the
ask
memory of
Joe.
Ferid. This kind of complication was unwelcome on top of the demands of his commissarial duties.
Because then I don't have to sit and think
He
and go,
resolved to
oh,
guard the
geez,
crystal, carry it
what
until
if I've
Ferid
asked too
told him
much?
otherwise.
What if I've
But
asked
still,
too
he
little?
fretted that the matter was of the highest importance, and time was somehow slipping away. He crossed the knurled rail at the edge of the bay.
But to be fair, I messaged Joe, and
The
that was 2
enormous
days ago. He's not responded.
spasmed in front of him, milky tendrils of protomatter licking like ribbons of fluid mist against the outside of the glass. The glass bay.
Oh, so what you having for tea?
Immaterium observatories on the Absolute, allowing the navigators and the clerics of the Astrographicus division visual access to the void. In the center of the bay's deck, on a vast platform mechanism of oiled cogs and toothed gears, giant sensorium scopes, aura imagifiers, and luminosity evaluators cycled and turned, regarding the maelstrom, charting, cogitating, assessing and transmitting the assembled data via chattering relays and humming crystal stacks to the main bridge 8 kilometers away, at the top of the Absolute's tallest command spire. The observatories
No, he
were
plays
not areas.
World of
Their
Warcraft
spaces were not recommended for those new to space.
all the time.
It was said
Non-stop.
that if the glass wasn't shielded, the view could derange and twist the minds of even hardened astrographers. The elevator's choral chime had been intended to warn Gaunt of this. But he had seen the Imperium before, countless times on his voyages. It no longer scared him. Filtered in this way, he found the fluctuations of the warp somehow easeful, as if its cataclysmic turmoil allowed his own mind to rest. He could think here. Around the edge of the dome, the names of militant commanders, lord generals, and master admirals were etched into the polished ironwork of the sill in a roll of honor. Under each name was a short legend indicating the theaters of their victories. Some names he knew from the history texts and required reading in the Schola back on Ignatius. Some, their inscriptions old and faded, were unknown, 10 centuries dead. He worked his way around the edge of the dome, reading the plaques. It took him almost half a circuit before he found the name of the one he had actually known personally. War Master Slader, Makaroth's predecessor, dead at the infamous triumph of Balhaut in the 10th year of this crusade.
You can show Darrow, but I prefer Joe.
Study. The elevator doors at the top of the transit shaft hissed open, and he caught once more a snatch of the chanted warning chime.
Okay, so they're
A
bronze.
figure stepped out onto the deck, a Navy rating, carrying a
I preferred
stick.
Joe because
The rating looked across at the lone figure by the
when I was
rail,
like 15, 16,
turned away and
I meant to do
disappeared from
a buy-off from Darryl, and
Patrol, Gaunt decided absently.
yeah, he's
He
still
turned
not
back to
happy
the
about that,
instructions
so,
and read Slado's plaque again.
you know.
He remembered Balhaut, the firestorms that swept the night away and took the forces of chaos with it. He and his beloved Hyakins had been at the center of it, in the mud lakes, struggling through the brimstone atmosphere under the weight of their heavy rebreathers. Slado had taken credit for that famous win, rightly enough as War Master, but in sweat and blood it had been Gaunt's. His finest hour, and he had Slado's deathbed decoration to prove it. He could hear the grind of the enemy assault carriers even now, striding on their long hydraulic legs through the mud, peppering the air with sharp...
I mean, if you want to take time into consideration, you can do as well. I mean, the entire thing's getting live streamed.
A physical memory
And
of the tension and fatigue ran down his
obviously,
spine.
you can see that
The superhuman
I'm not
effort
really,
with
I'm not
which
taking
he
the piss
and
with
his
it.
best fire teams had stormed the Oligarchy
You know,
Gate ahead
doing
of
what I
the
can,
glorious
which
forces
is up to you, by all means.
driving a wedge of las fire
I'm not picky.
and bursts
This is fun for
through
me,
the
to be fair with you.
overhanging plates of the enemy's buttress screens. He saw Tannhaus making his lucky shot, still talked about in the barracks of the Hayaka. A single lasbolt that penetrated a foul, demented chaos dreadnought through the visor slit, detonating the power systems within. He saw Veach taking 6 of the foe with his bayonet when his last power cell ran dry. He saw the tower of the plutocrat combust and fall under the sustained Hayakan fire. He saw the faces of the unnumbered dead rising from the mud, from the flames. He opened his eyes, and the visions fled. The Empyrean lashed and blossomed in front of him, unknowable. He was about to turn and return to his quarters, but there was a blade at his throat. 2. There was no sense of anyone behind him, no shadow, no heat, no sound or smell of breath. It was as if the cold sharpness under his chin had arrived there unaccompanied. He knew at once he was at the mercy of a formidable opponent.
Now, to be fair, the good thing about if you get me to paint the entire army is
If the blade's owner
then it's all done to the same standard, it's all done with the same paint scheme, and
there was something that made him more
you know,
useful.
so that's the good thing at least.
He was fairly certain what that was. What do you want? He asked calmly. No games, a voice said from behind him. The tone was low and even, not a whisper, but of a level that was somehow softer and lower still. The pressure of the cold blade increased against the skin of his neck, fractionally. You are reckoned to be an intelligent man. Dispense with the delaying tactics. Gaunt nodded carefully. If he was going to live even a minute more, he had to play this precisely right. This isn't the way to solve this, Brockus, he said carefully. There was a pause. What? Now who's playing games? I know what this is about. I'm sorry you and your patrician comrades lost face on pyrites. Lost a few teeth, too, I'll bet. But this won't help. Don't be a fool. You've got this wrong. This isn't about some stupid regimental rivalry. It isn't. Think hard, fool. Think why this might really be happening. I want you to understand why you are about to die. The weight of the blade against his throat shifted slightly. It didn't lessen its pressure, but there was a momentary alteration in the angle. Gaunt knew his comments had misdirected his adversary for a heartbeat. His only chance. He struck backwards hard with his right elbow, simultaneously pulling back from the blade and raising his left hand to fend it off. The knife cut through his cuff, but he pulled clear as his assailant reeled from the elbow jab. Gaunt had barely turned when the other countered, striking high. They fell together, limbs twisting to gain a positive hold. The wayward blade ripped Gaunt's jacket open down the seam of the left sleeve. Gaunt forced the center of balance over and threw a sideways punch with his right fist that knocked his assailant off him. A moment later, the commissar was on his feet, drawing the silver Tanith blade from his belt. He saw his opponent for the first time. The Navy rating, a short, lean man of indeterminate age. There was something strange about him. The way his mouth was set in a determined grimace, while his wide eyes seemed to be pleading. The rating flipped up onto his feet with a scissor over his back and legs, and coiled around in a hunched, offensive posture, the knife held blade uppermost in his right hand. How could a deck rating know moves like that? Gaunt worried. The practice movements, the perfect balance, the silent resolve, all betrayed a specialist killer, an adept in the arts of stealth and assassination. But close up, Gaunt saw the man was just an engineer, his naval uniform a little tight around a belly going to fat. Was it just a disguise? The rank pins, insignia, and the coded identity seal mandatory for all crew personnel all seemed real. The blade was short and leaf-shaped, shorter than the rubberized grip it protruded from. There was a series of geometric holes in the body of the blade itself, reducing the overall weight whilst retaining the structural strength. It plainly wasn't metal. It was matte blue, ceramic, invisible to the ship's weapon scan fields. Gaunt stared into the other's unblinking eyes, searching for recognition or contact. The gaze which met him was a desperate, piteous look, as if from something trapped inside the menacing body. They circled, slowly. Gaunt kept his body angled and low, as he had learned in bayonet drill with the Hyakins. But he held the Tanith blade loosely in his right hand, with the blade descending from the fist and tilted in towards his body. He'd watched the odd style the Ghost had used in knife drill with interest. One long week in transit aboard the Navarre, he had got Corbeck to train him in the nuances.
Nice man.
The method made good use of the weight and length of the Tanith war knife. He kept his left hand up to block, not with a warding open palm as the Hyakins had practiced, and as his opponent now adopted, but in a fist, knuckles outward. Better to stop a blade with your hand than your throat, Tannhaus had told him years before. Better the blade cracks off your knuckles than opens a smile in your palm, Corbeck had finessed more recently. You want me dead? Gaunt hissed.
That was not my primary objective. Where is the crystal?
Gaunt started as the man replied. Though the mouth moved, the voice was not coming from it. The lip movements barely synced with the words. He'd seen that before somewhere, years ago. It looked like possession. Gaunt bristled as fear ran down his back. More than the fear of mortal combat, the fear of witchcraft, of psychers. A Commissar Colonel won't be easily missed, Gaunt managed. The rating shrugged stiffly, as if to indicate the infinite raging vastness beyond the glass dome.
No one is so important he won't be missed out here. Not even the War Master himself.
They had circled 3 times now.
Where is the crystal?
The rating asked again. What crystal?
The one you acquired in Gracia City.
Returned the killer in that floating, unmatched voice.
Give it up now, and we can forget this meeting ever took place.
Who sent you?
Nothing in the known systems would make me answer that question.
I have no crystal. I don't know what you're talking about.
A lie.
Even if it was, would I be so foolish to carry anything with me?
I've searched your quarters twice. It's not there. You must have it. Did you swallow it? Dissection is not beyond me.
Gaunt was about to reply when the rating suddenly stamped forward, circling his blade in a sweep that missed the Commissar's shoulder by a hair's breadth. Gaunt was about to feint and counter when the blade swept back in reverse of the slice. The touch of a stud on the grip had caused the ceramic blade to retract with a pneumatic hiss and re-extend through the flat pommel of the grip, reversing the angle. The tip sheared through his blocking left forearm and sprayed blood across the deck. Gaunt leapt backwards with an angry curse, but the rating followed through relentlessly, reversing his blade again so it poked up forward of his punching fist. Gaunt blocked it with an improvised turn of his knife and kicked out at the attacker, catching his left knee with his boot tip. The man backed off, but the circling did not
Right, I need to put some notes in my
This was
notebook.
unlike the sparring in bayonet training, the endless measuring and dancing, the occasional clash and jab. The man rallied immediately after each feint, each deflection, and struck in once more, clicking his blade up and down out of the grip to wrong-foot Gaunt, sometimes striking with an upwards blow on the first stroke and thumbing the blade downwards to rate on the return. Gaunt survived 8, 9, 10 potentially lethal passes, thanks only to his speed and the attacker's unfamiliarity with the curious Tanith blade technique. They clashed again, and this time Gaunt jabbed not with his knife, but with his warding left hand, directly at the man's weapon. The blade cut a stinging gash in his knuckles, but he slipped in under the knife and grabbed the man by the right wrist. They clenched, Gaunt driving forward for his superior size and height. The man's left hand found his throat and clamped it in an iron grip. Gaunt gagged, choking. His vision swimming as his neck muscles fought against the tightening grip. Desperately, he slammed the man backwards into the guardrail. The rating thumbed his blade catch again, and the reversing tongue of ceramic stabbed down into Gaunt's wrist. In return, he plunged his own knife hard through the tricep of the arm holding his throat. They broke, reeling away from each other, blood spurting from the stab wounds in their arms and hands. Gaunt was panting and short of breath from the pain, but the man made no sound, as if he felt no pain, or as if pain was no hindrance to him. The rating came at him again, and Gaunt swung low to block, but at the last moment the man tossed the ceramic blade from his right hand to his left, the blade reversing itself through the grip in mid-air, so that what had started as an upward strike from the right turned into a downward stab from the left. The blade dug into the meat of Gaunt's right shoulder, deadened only by the padding and leather of his jacket. White-hot pain lanced down
There we go.
the right
I
side,
made a note.
crushing his ribs and the breath inside them. The blade slid free cleanly, and blood drizzled after it. The hot warmth was coursing down the inside of his sleeve and slickening his grip on the knife handle. It dripped off his knuckles and the silver blade. If he kept bleeding at that rate, even if he could hold off his assailant, he knew he would not survive much longer. The rating crossed his guard again, switching hands like a juggler, to the right and then back to the left, reversing the blade direction with each return. He feinted, sliced in low at Gaunt's belly with a left-hand pass, and then pushed himself at the Commissar. Gaunt stabbed in to meet the low cut, and caught the point of his silver blade through one of the perforations in the ceramic blade. Instinctively, he wrenched his blade back and levered at the point of contact. A second later, the ceramic tech knife whirled away across the glass bay and skittered out of sight over the cold floor. Suddenly disarmed, the rating hesitated for a heartbeat, and Gaunt rammed his Tanith knife up and in, puncturing the man's torso and cracking his sternum. The rating reeled away sharply, sucking for air as his lungs failed. The silver knife was stuck fast in his chest. Thin blood jetted from the wound and gurgled from his slack mouth. He hit the deck, knees first, then fell flat on his face, his torso propped up like a tent on the hard metal prong of the knife. Gaunt stumbled back against the rail, gasping hoarsely, his body shaking with burning pain jeering at him. He wiped a bloody hand across his clammy, ashen face and gazed down at the rating's body as it lay on the floor in a pool of scarlet fluid. He sank to the deck, trembling and weak. A laugh, half chuckle, half sob, broke from him. When next he saw Colm Corbeck, he would buy him the biggest. The rating got up again. The man wriggled back on his knees.
Right, where's my bath
salt
salt gold?
And then swung his body up straight, arms swaying limp at his sides. Kneeling, he slowly turned his head to face the prone, dismayed Gaunt. His face was blank, and his eyes were no longer pleading and trapped. They were gone, in fact. A fierce green light raged inside his skull, making his eyes pupilless slits of blind fire. His mouth lolled open, and a similar glow shone out, backlighting his teeth.
Ah, there it
With
is.
one simple, direct motion, he pulled the Tanith knife out of his chest. There was no more blood, just a shaft of bright green light poking from the wound. With a sigh of finality, Gaunt knew that the psychic puppetry was continuing. The man, who had been a helpless thrall of the psychic magic when he first attacked, was now reanimated by abominable sorcery. It would function long enough to win the fight. It would kill him.
All right.
Gaunt
That
battled with
pain,
his senses to
that
keep awake,
pain,
to get up, to run.
that pain,
He was blacking out.
that
The rating
pain.
swayed towards him, like a Zumbe from the old myths of the non-dead. Eyes shining, expression blank. The Tanith blade that had killed him clutched in the
Dear
claw of the
Lord,
hand.
sit and paint
The dead
bronze.
thing raised the knife to strike. 3. 2 last shots slammed it sideways. Another tight pair broke it open along the ribcage, venting an incandescent halo of bright psychic energy. A 5th shot to the head dropped the thing like it had been struck in the ear with a sledgehammer. Colm Corbeck, the last pistol in his hand, stalked across the deck of the glass bay and stood looking down at the charred and smouldering shape on the floor, a shape that had self-ignited and was spilling vaporous green energies as it ate itself up. Somewhere, the weapon's interdiction alarm started wailing. Using the rail for support, Gaunt was almost on his feet again by the time Corbeck reached him. Easy there,
And I've got a
Commissar.
wet palette now as
Gaunt
well.
waved him off, aware of the way his blood was still feebly dribbling onto the deck. Your timing, he grunted, is perfect, Colonel. Corbeck grimly gestured over his shoulder. Gaunt turned to look where he pointed. Bryn Milo stood by the elevator assembly, looking flushed and fierce. The lad had a dream, Corbeck said, refusing to be ignored and looping his arm under his commander's shoulder. Came to me at once when he couldn't find you in your quarters. Milo crossed to them. The wounds need attention, he said. We'll get him to the apothecarian, Corbeck began. No, Milo said firmly, and, despite the pain, Gaunt almost laughed at the sudden authority his junior aide directed at the shaggy brute who was the company commander. Back to our barrack decks. Use our own medics. I don't think the Commissar wants this incident to become a matter for official inquiry. Corbeck looked at the boy curiously, but Gaunt nodded. In his experience, there was no point fighting the boy's gift for judgment. Milo never intruded into the Commissar's privacy, but he seemed to understand instinctively Gaunt's intentions and wishes. Gaunt could not keep secrets from the boy, but he trusted him and valued his insight beyond measure. Gaunt looked at Corbeck. Bryn's right. There's more to this. I'll explain later, but I want the ship hierarchy kept out of it until we know who to trust. The weapons alarm continued to sound. In that case, we better get out of here, Corbeck began. He was cut off by the elevator shutters gliding open with a breathy hiss and a choral exhalation. 6 Imperial Navy troopers in fiber-weave shipboard armor and low-brimmed helmets exited in a pack and dropped to their knees, covering the trio with compact stub guns. One barked curt orders into his helmet voxling. An officer emerged from the elevator in their wake. Like them, his uniform was emerald with silver piping, the colors of the Segmentum Pacificus fleet, but he was not armored like his detail. He was tall, a little overweight, and his puffy flesh was unhealthily pale. A career spacer, thought Corbeck. Probably hasn't stood on real soil in decades. The officer stared at them. The shaggy guard miscreant with his unauthorized las pistol. The injured, bloody man leaning against him and bleeding on the deck. The rangy, strange-eyed boy. He pursed his lips, spoke quietly into his own voxling, and then touched a stud on the facilitator wand he carried, waving it absently into the air around him. The alarm shut off mid-whine. I am Warrant Officer Lekulansi. It is my responsibility to oversee the
British,
security
because
of this
British
vessel
is
on behalf
best.
of Lord Captain Grasticus. I take a dim view of illicit weapons on this holy craft, though I always expect Imperial Guard scum to try something. I look with even greater displeasure on the use of said weapons. Now, this is not how it looked, Corbeck began, moving forward with a reassuring smile. 6 stub gun muzzles swung their attention directly at him. The detail's weapons were short-line, pump-action models designed for shipboard use. The glass shards and wire twists modded into each shell would roar out in a tightly packed cone of micro-shrapnel, entirely capable of shredding a man at close range. But unlike a lasgun or a bolter, there was no danger of them puncturing the outer hull. No hasty movements, no eager explanations. Lekulansi stared at them. Questions will be answered in due time, under the formal process of your interrogation. You are aware that the firing of a prohibited weapon on a transport vessel of the Adeptus Mechanicus is an offense punishable by court-martial. Surrender your weapon. Corbeck handed his last pistol to the trooper, who rose smartly to take it from him. This is stupid, Gaunt said abruptly. The guns turned their attention to him. Do you know who I am, Lekulansi? The warrant officer tensed as his name was used without formal title. He narrowed his flesh-hooded eyes. Gaunt hauled himself forward and stood free of Corbeck's support. I am Commissar Colonel Ibram Gaunt. Warrant Officer Lekulansi froze. Without the coat, the cap, the badges of authority, Gaunt looked like any low-born guard officer. Come here, Gaunt told him. The man hesitated, then crossed to Gaunt, whispering a low order into his voxling. The guard detail immediately rose from their knees, snapped to attention, and slung their weapons. That's better, Corbeck smiled. Gaunt placed a hand on Lekulansi's shoulder, and the officer stiffened with outrage. Gaunt was pointing to something on the deck, a charred greenish slick or stain, oily and lumpy. Do you know what that is? Lekulansi shook his head. It's the remains of an assassin who set upon me here. The weapon's discharge was my first officer saving my life. I will formally caution him for concealing a firearm aboard. Strictly against standing orders. Gaunt smiled to see a tiny bead of nervous perspiration begin to streak Lekulansi's pallid brow. He was one of yours, Lekulansi. A rating. But he was in the sway of others. Dark forces that beguiled and drove him like a toy. You don't like illicit weapons on your ship, eh? How about illicit psychers? Some of the security troopers muttered and made warding gestures. Lekulansi stammered. But who? Who would want to kill you, sir? I am a soldier. A successful soldier, Gaunt smiled coldly. I make enemies all the time. He gestured down at the remains. Have this analyzed, then have it purged. Make sure no foul, unholy taint has touched this precious ship. Report any findings directly to me, no matter how insignificant. Once my wounds have been treated, I will report to Lord Captain Grasticus personally and submit a full account. Lekulansi was lost for words. With Corbeck supporting him, Gaunt left the glass bay. At the elevator doors, Lekulansi caught the hard look in the boy's eyes. He shuddered. In the elevator, Milo turned to Gaunt. His eyes were like a snake's. He is not trustworthy. Gaunt nodded. He had changed his mind. Just minutes before, he had reconciled himself to acting as Ferret's courier, guardian to the crystal. But now things had changed. He wouldn't sit by, idly waiting. He would act with purpose. He would enter the game and find out the rules and learn how to win. That would mean learning the contents of the crystal. 4.
Best I can do,
murmured Dorden, the ghost's chief medic, making a half-hearted gesture around him that implicated the whole of the regimental infirmary. The ghost's infirmary was a suite of 3 low, corbel-vaulted rooms set as an annex to the barrack deck where the Tanith First were berthed. Its walls and roof were washed with a greenish off-white paint, and the hard floors had been lined with scrubbed redstone tiles. On dull steel shelves and bays around the rooms were ranked
All right, fair enough, dude.
glass-stoppered bottles with yellowing paper labels, mostly full of treacly fluids, surgical pastes, dried powders.
I think this is the first time I've ever used
organic
my wet
food
palette.
salts, clear, gluey suspensions. Racks of polished instruments sat in pull-out drawers and plastic waste bags. Stale bedding and bandage rolls were packed into low, lidded boxes around the walls that doubled as seats. There was a murky autoclave on a brass trolley, 2 Resuscitrex units with shiny iron paddles, and a
Ah,
side
so
table
they
with
are.
an apothecary
Those
scales,
backpacks
a
are bro.
diagnostic probe, and a blood cleanser set on it. The air was musty and rank, and there were dark stains on the flooring.
We're not over-equipped, as you can see.
Dorden added breezily. He patched the commissar's wounds with supplies from his own field kit, which sat open on one of the bench lockers. He hadn't trusted the freshness or sterility of any of the materials provided by the infirmary. Gaunt sat, stripped to the waist, on one of the low brass gurneys which lined the center of the main chamber, its wheels locked into restraining lugs in the tiled floor. The gurney's springs squeaked and moaned as Gaunt shifted his weight on the stained, stinking mattress. Dorden had patched the wound in the commissar's shoulder with sterile dressings, washed the whole limb in pungent blue sterilizing gel, and then pinched the mouth of the wound shut with Bakelite suture clamps that looked like the heads of biting insects. Gaunt tried to flex his arm.
Don't do that,
Dorden said quickly.
I'd wrap it in false flesh if I could find any. But besides, the wound should breathe. Honestly, you'd be better off in the main hospital ward.
Gaunt shook his head. You've done a fine job, he said. Dorden smiled. He didn't want to press the commissar on the issue. Corbeck had muttered something about keeping this private. Dorden was a small man, older than most of the ghosts, with a grey beard and warm eyes. He'd been a doctor on Tanith, running an extended practice through the farms and settlements of Beldame and the forest wilds of County Prize. He'd been drafted in the founding to fulfill the administratum's requirements for regimental medical personnel. His wife had died a year before the founding, and his only son was a trooper in the 9th Platoon. His one daughter, her husband, and their firstborn had perished in the flames of Tanith. He had left nothing behind in the embers of his home world, except the memory of years of community service, a duty he now carried on for the good of the last men of Tanith. He refused to carry a weapon, and thus was the only ghost that Gaunt couldn't rely on to fight. But Gaunt hardly cared. He had 60 or 70 men in his command who wouldn't still be there but for Dorden.
I've checked for venom taint or fiber toxin. You're lucky. The blade was clean. Cleaner than mine.
Dorden chuckled, and it made Gaunt smile.
Unusual,
Dorden added, and fell silent. Gaunt raised an eyebrow. How so?
I understood assassins like to toxify their blades as insurance,
Dorden said simply. I never said it was an assassin.
You didn't have to. I may be a non-combatant. I may be an old fool, but I didn't come down in the last barrage.
Don't trouble yourself with it, Dorden, Gaunt said, flexing his arm again against the medic's advice. It stung, ached, throbbed. You've worked your usual magic. Stay impartial. Don't get drawn in. Dorden was scrubbing his suture clamp and wound probes in a bowl of filmy antiseptic oil.
Impartial? Do you know something, Ibram Gaunt?
Gaunt blinked as if slapped. No one had spoken to him with such paternal authority since the last time he had been in the company of his uncle Dersius. No, not the last time. Gordon turned back, wiping the tools on the sheets of white.
Oh, nice, dude.
Forgive me, Commissar. I am speaking out of turn.
Speak anyway, friend. Gordon jerked a lean thumb to indicate out beyond the archway into the barrack deck.
These are all I've got. The last pitiful scraps of Tanith gene stock. My only link to the past, and to the green world I loved. I'll keep patching and mending and binding and sewing them back together until they're all gone, or I'm gone, or the horizons of all known space have withered and died. And while you may not be Tanith, I know many of the men now treat you as such. Me? I'm not sure. Too much of the Hulan about you, I'd say.
Hulan?
Hulan. Forgive me. Slipping into the old tongue. Outsider. Unknown. It doesn't translate directly.
I'm sure it doesn't.
It wasn't an insult. You may not be Tanith breed, but you're for us, every way. I think you care, Gaunt. Care about your ghosts. I think you'll do all in your power to see us right, to take us to glory, to take us to peace. That's what I believe every night when I lay down to rest, and every time a bombardment starts, or the dropships fall, or the boys go over the wire. That matters.
Gaunt shrugged and wished he hadn't. Does it?
I've spoken to medics with other regiments. At the field hospital on Fortis, for instance. So many of them say their commissars don't care a jot about their men. They see them as fodder for the guns. Is that how you see us?
No.
No, I thought not. So that makes you rare indeed. Something worth hanging on to, for the good of these poor ghosts. You may not be Tanith, but if assassins are starting to hunger for your blood, I start to care. For the ghosts, I care.
He fell silent. Then, I remember not to leave you uninformed, Gaunt said, reaching for his undershirt.
I thank you for that. For a Hulan, you're a good man, Ibram Gaunt. Like the Anroch back home.
Gaunt froze.
What did you say?
Gordon looked round at him sharply.
Anroth. I said Anroth. It wasn't an insult either.
What does it mean? Gordon hesitated uneasily, unsettled by Gaunt's hard gaze.
The Anroth. Well, household spirits. It's a cradle tale from Tanith. They used to say that the Anroth were spirits from other worlds, beautiful worlds of order, who came to Tanith to watch over our families. That's nothing. Just an old memory. A forest saying.
Why does it matter, Commissar? Said a new voice. Gaunt and Gordon looked around to see Milo sat on a bench seat near the door, watching them intently. How long have you been there? Gaunt asked sharply, surprising himself with his anger. A few minutes only. The Anroth are part of Tanith lore, like the Drudfelad, who ward the trees, and the Nyasis, who watch over the streams and waters.
Why would it alarm you so?
I've heard the word before. Somewhere, Gaunt said, getting to his feet. Who knows? A word like it? It doesn't matter. He went to pull on his undershirt, but realized it was ripped and bloody, and cast it aside. Milo, get me another from my quarters, he said. Milo rose and handed Gaunt a fresh undershirt in his canvas pack. Gordon handed him. Gaunt faltered, nodded his thanks, and took the shirt. Both Milo and the medical officer had noticed the multitude of scars which laced Gaunt's broad, muscled torso, and had made no comment. How many theaters, how many fronts, how many life-or-death combats had it taken to accumulate so many marks of pain? But, as Gaunt stood, Gordon noticed the scar across Gaunt's belly for the first time, and gasped. The wound line was long and ancient, a grotesque braid of buckled scar tissue.
Sacred faith,
Gordon said too loudly.
Where?
Gaunt shook him off.
Remember, Mike's doing stuff
Very
while
old.
he watches this dude.
Gaunt slipped on his undershirt, and the wound was hidden. He pulled up his braces and reached for his tunic.
But how did you get such a
Gaunt looked at him sharply. Enough. Gaunt buttoned his tunic and then put on the long leather coat which Milo was already holding for him. He set his cap on his head. Are the officers ready? He asked. Milo nodded. As you ordered. With a nod to Dorden, Gaunt marched out of the infirmary. 5. It had crossed his mind to wonder who to trust. That he could trust all of them. A few minutes' thought had brought him to the realization that he could trust them all. Every one of the ghosts, from Colonel Corbeck down to the lowliest of the troopers. His only qualm lay with the malcontent Rawn and his immediate group of cronies in the 3rd platoon. Men like Fagor. Gaunt left the infirmary and walked down the short
Jeez, dude, why
into
don't you
the
get yourself to
barrack
bed?
deck proper. Corbeck was waiting. Colum Corbeck had been waiting for almost an hour. Alone in the antechamber of the infirmary, he had enjoyed plenty of time to fret about the things he hated most in the universe. First and last of them was space travel. Corbeck was the son of a machine smith who had worked his living at a forge beneath the gable barn on the first wide bend of the River Prize. Most of his father's work had come from log handling machines, rasp saws, timber derricks, track sleds. Many times, as a boy, he'd shimmied down into the oily service trenches to hold the inspection lamp so his father could examine the knotted dripping axles and stricken synchro mesh of a 20-wheeled flatbed, ailing under its cargo of young, wet wood from the mills up at Beldame or Sotras. Growing up, he'd worked the reaper mills in Sotras and seen men lose fingers, hands, and knees to the screaming bandsaws and circular razors. His lungs had clogged with saw mist, and he had developed a hacking cough.
All right.
Then he joined the militia of Tanith Magna on a dare, and on top of a broken heart, and patrolled the sacred stretches of the Prize County Nalwood groves for poachers and smugglers. It had been a right enough life. The loamy earth below, the trees above, and the far starlight beyond the leaves. He'd come to understand the ways of the twisting forests, and the shifting Nal groves and clearings. He'd learned the knife, the stealth patterns, and the joy of the hunt. He'd been happy, so long as the stars had been up there and the ground underfoot. Now, the ground was gone. Gone forever. The damp, piney scents of the forest soil, the rich sweetness of the leaf mold, the soft depths of the Nal spores as they drifted and accumulated. He'd sung songs up to the stars, taken their silent blessing, even cursed them, all so long as they were far away. He never thought he would travel in their midst. Corbeck was afraid of the crossings, as he knew many of his company were afraid, even now after so many of them. To leave soil, to leave land, sea and sky behind, to part the stars and crusade through the immaterium, that was truly terrifying. He knew the Absalom was a sturdy ship. He'd seen its vast bulk from the view spaces of the dog ship that had brought him aboard. But he had also seen the great timber barges
Hey,
of
dude.
Mills, Founder, Shudder, and Splinter in the hard watercourses of the Beldame Rapids. Ships sailed their ways, he knew, until the waves got too strong for them and gave them up. He hated it all. The smell of the air, the coldness of the walls, the inconstancy of the artificial gravity, the perpetual constancy of the vibrating Imperium drives. All of it. Only his concern for the Commissar's welfare had got him past his phobias onto the nightmare of the Glass Bay Observatory. Even then, he'd focused his attention on Gaunt, the troopers, that idiot warrant officer, anything at all but the cavorting insanity beyond the glass. He longed for soil underfoot, for real air, for breeze and rain, and the hush of nodding branches. Corbeck.
Yeah, it's called
Snapped to attention as Gaunt approached. Milo was a little way behind the Commissar. Sir, remember
cordial.
what I was telling you in the bar on Pyrites? Not precisely, sir. I was pretty far gone. Gaunt grinned. Good. Then it'll all come as a surprise to you, too. Are the officers ready? Corbeck nodded perfunctorily. Except Major Rawn, as you ordered. Gaunt lifted his cap, smoothed his cropped hair back with his hands, and replaced it squarely again. A moment, and I'll join you in the staff room. Gaunt marched away down the deck and entered the main billet of the barracks. The Ghosts had been given Barrack Deck 3, a vast honeycomb of long, dark vaults in which bunks were strung from chains in a herringbone pattern. Adjoining these sleeping vaults was a desolate recreation hall and a trio of padded exercise chambers. All 40 surviving platoons, a little over 2,000 ghosts, were billeted here. The smell of sweat, smoke, and body heat rose from the bunk vaults.
One sec,
Fagor, and
dude.
the rest of the 3rd platoon were waiting for him on the slip ramp. They had been training in the exercise chambers, and each one carried one of the shock poles provided for combat practice. These neural stunners were the only weapons allowed to them during a crossing. They could fence with them, spar with them, and even set them to long-range discharge and target shoot against the squeaking, moving metal decoys in the badly oiled automatic range. Gaunt saluted Rawn. The men snapped to attention. "How do you read the barrack deck, Major?" Rawn faltered. "Commissar? Is it secure? There are 8 deployment shafts and 2 to the dropship hangar, plus a number of service wings. Take your men, spread out and guard them all. No one must get in or out of this barrack
I do
deck
that
without
with
my knowledge."
silver.
Rawn looked faintly perplexed. "How do we hold any intruders off, Commissar, given our lack of weapons?" Gaunt took a shock pole from Trooper Neff and then laid him out on the deck with a jolt to the belly. "Use these," Gaunt suggested. "Report to me every half hour. Report to me directly with the name of anyone who attempts access." Pausing for a moment to study Rawn's face and make sure his instructions were clearly understood, Gaunt turned and walked back up the ramp. "What's he up to?" Fagor asked the Major when Gaunt was out of earshot. Rawn shook his head. He would find out. Until he did, he had a sentry duty to organize. 6. The staff room was an old briefing theatre next to the infirmary annex. Steps led down into a
I'm just trying to fix
with 3
something.
tiers of varnished wooden seats around the circumference and a lacquered black console in the center on a dais. The console, squat and rounded like a polished mushroom, was an old tactical display unit with a mirrored screen in its top, which had once broadcast luminous 3-dimensional hololithic forms into the air above it during strategy councils. But it was old and broken.
It
Gaunt
should.
used it as a seat. The
It
officers
should
filed
be
in.
alright now.
Corbeck, Dorden, and then the platoon leaders. Merrin, McCall, Corral, Lerod, Hasker, Blaine, Forlaw. 39 men, all told. Last in was Val, recently promoted. Milo closed the shutter hatch and perched at the back. The men sat in a semicircle, facing their commander. "What's going on, sir?" Val asked. Gaunt smiled slightly. As a newcomer to officer-level briefings, Val was eager and forthright, and oblivious to the usually reserved protocols of staff discussions. I should have promoted him earlier, Gaunt thought wryly. "This is totally unofficial. Ghost business, but unofficial. I want to advise you of a situation so that you can be aware of it and act accordingly if the need arises. But it does not go beyond this chamber. Tell your men as much as they need to know to facilitate matters, but spare them the details." He had their attention now. "I won't dress this up. As far as I know, and believe me, that's no further than I could throw brag, there's a power struggle going on. One that threatens to tear this whole crusade to tatters. You've all heard how much infighting went on after War Master Slado's death, how many of the Lord High Militants wanted to take his place. And that weasel Makarov got it, Corbeck said with a rueful grin. "That's War Master Weasel Makarov, Colonel," Gaunt corrected. He let the men chuckle. Good humor would make this easier. "Like him or not, he's in charge now, and that makes it simple for us. Like me, you are all loyal to the Emperor, and therefore to War Master Makarov. Slado chose him to be successor. Makarov's word is the word of the Golden Throne itself. He speaks with Imperium authority." Gaunt paused. The men watched him quizzically, as if they had missed the point of some joke. "But someone's not happy about that, are they?" Milo said dourly from the back. The officers snapped around to stare at him, and then turned back equally sharply as they heard the Commissar laugh. "Indeed. There are probably many who resent his promotion over them, and one in particular we all know, if only by name.
I'm
Lord
just
Militant
sorting some of my
General
brushes
Trevere,
out.
the very man who commands our section of the Crusade Force." "What are you saying, sir?" Lerod asked with aghast disbelief. Lerod was a large, shaven-headed sergeant with an Imperial Eagle tattoo on his temple. He had commanded the militia unit in Teneth Ultima, the Imperial Shrine City on the Ghost's lost home world, and as a result, He, along with the other troopers from Ultima, were the most devoted and resolute Imperial servants in the Tanith First. Gaunt knew that the Rod would be perhaps the most difficult to convince. Are you suggesting the Lord General Dravier has renegade tendencies? That he is disloyal? But he's your direct superior, sir. Which is why this discussion is being held in private. If I'm right, who can we turn to? The men greeted this with uncomfortable silence. Gaunt went on. Dravier has never hidden the fact that he felt Slado snubbed him by appointing the younger Makarov. It must rankle deeply to serve under an upstart who has been promoted past you. I am pretty certain that Dravier plans to usurp the War Master. Let them fight for it, Val spat, and others concurred. What's another dead officer? Begging your pardon, sir. Gaunt smiled. You echo my initial thoughts on the matter, Sergeant. But think it through. If Dravier moves his own forces against Makarov, it will weaken this entire endeavor. Weaken it at the very moment we should be consolidating for the push into new, more hostile territories. What good are we against the forces of the enemy if we're battling with ourselves? If it came to it, we'd be wide open, weak, and ripe for slaughter. Of this.
We call it.
Of this.
We call it crisps, mate. I'm going to make a tactical decision. I want a hot chocolate.
Dravier's spy network was
So I'm going to go have a hot. I'm going to go make a hot chocolate. It'll take me 2 minutes.
By who? The Rod asked. By Makarov's loyal spy.
There's audio book for you.
Imperial intelligence working to undermine Dravier's conspiracy. They are covert, vulnerable, few, but they are the only things working against the mechanisms of Dravier's ascendancy. Where are you? Dorden asked quietly. Gaunt paused. Even now he could not tell them the real reason. That it was foretold. I was there, and I was trusted. I don't understand it all. An old friend of mine is part of the intelligence hub, and he contacted me to caretake this precious cargo. It seemed there was no one else on Pyrites close enough or trusted enough to do it. Val shifted in his seat, scratching his shoulder implant. So, what's on it? I have no idea, Gaunt said. It's encoded. The Rod started to say something else, but Gaunt added, It's vermilion level. There was a long pause, accompanied only by Blaine's long, impressed whistle. Now do you see? Gaunt asked. What do we do? Val said dully. We find out what's on it. Then we decide. But how? Merrin began, but Gaunt held up a calming hand. That's my job, and I think I can do it. Easily, in fact. After that, well, that's why I wanted you all in on this. Already, Dravier's covert network has attempted to kill me and retrieve the crystal. Twice. Once on Pyrites, and now here again on the ship. I need you with me, to guard this priceless thing, to keep the Lord Militant General's spies from it, to cover me until I can see the way clear to the action we should take. Silence reigned in the staff room. Are you with me? Gaunt asked. The silence beat on, almost stifling. The officers exchanged furtive glances. In the end, it was Lerod who spoke for them. Gaunt was particularly glad it was Lerod. Do you have to ask, Commissar? He said, simply. Gaunt smiled his thanks. He got up from the display unit and stepped off the dais as the men rose. Let's get to it. Rawn's already setting patrols to keep this barrack deck secure. Support and bolster that effort. I want to feel confident that the area of this ship given over to us is safe ground. Keep intruders out, or escort them directly to me. If the men question the precautions, tell them we think that those damn patricians might try something to ease their grudge against us. Terra knows that's true enough, and there are over 4 times our number of patricians aboard this vessel on the other barrack decks. And the patricians are undoubtedly in Dravier's pocket. I also want the entire deck searched for hidden Vox relays and Vista lines. Hasker, Val, use any men you know with technical aptitude to perform the sweep. They may be trying all manner of ways of spying on us. From this moment on, trust no one outside our regiment. No one. There is no way of telling who might be part of the conspiracy around us. The officers seemed eager, but unsettled. Gaunt knew that this was strange work for regular soldiers. They filed out, faces grave. Gaunt looked at the crystal in his hand. What are you hiding? He wondered. 7. Gaunt returned to his quarters with the silent Milo in tow. Corbeck had set 2 ghosts to guard the commissar's private room. Gaunt sat at the cogitator set into a wall alcove and began to explore the shipboard information he could access through the terminal. Lines of gently flickering amber text scrolled across the dark vista plate. He was hoping for a personnel manifest, searching for names that might hint at the identity of those that opposed him. But the details were jumbled and incomplete. It wasn't even clear which other regiments were actually aboard. The patricians were listed.
I'm back.
The complement of mechanized.
Got myself a hot chocolate.
Bavarian deck. But Gaunt knew there must be at least 2 other regimental strengths aboard, and the list was blank. He also tried to view the particulars of the Absalom's officer cadre and any other senior Imperial servants making the crossing with them. But those levels of data were locked by naval cipher veils, and Gaunt did not have the authority to penetrate them. Technology, such as it was a sandbagged barricade keeping him out. He sat back in his chair.
Go for it, dude.
His shoulder was sore. The crystal lay on the console near his hand. It was time to try it. Time to try his guess. He'd been putting it off, in case it didn't work, really. He got up. Milo had begun to snooze on a seat by the door, and the sudden movement startled him. Sir? Gaunt was on his feet, carelessly pulling his kit bag and luggage trunk from the wall locker. Let's hope the old man wasn't lying, was all Gaunt said. Which old man? Milo had no idea. Gaunt rifled through his baggage. A silk-swathed dress uniform ended up on the floor. Books and data slates spewed from pulled over.
Right. Fair enough, dude.
The commissar always packed his own effects, and Milo had never seen the few possessions Gaunt valued enough to carry with him. The boy glimpsed a bar of medals wound in tunic cloth, a larger, grand silver starburst rosette that fell from its velvet-lined case, a faded forage cap with Hayeken insignia, a glass box of painkiller tablets, a dozen large, yellow slab-like teeth, orc teeth, drilled and threaded onto a cord, an antique scope in a wooden case, a worn buckle brush and a tin of silver polish, a tarot gaming deck which spilled out of its ivory box. The cards were stiff pasteboard, decorated with commemorative images of a liberation festival on somewhere called Gilatus Decimus. Milo bent to collect them up before Gaunt trampled them. They were clean and new, never used. The lid of the box was inscribed with the letters D.O. Unheeding, Gaunt pulled handfuls of clothes out of his kit bag and flung them aside. Milo grinned. He felt somehow privileged to see this stuff, as if the commissar had let him into his mind for a while.
Have I got
Then,
a handle on
something
that?
else bounced off the accumulating clutter on the deck, and Milo paused. It was a toy battleship.
I'll do this one, then I need to go grab one of my handles for my hand.
And some of the towers and gun turrets had broken off. Milo turned away. There was something painful about the toy. Something that let him glimpse further into Ibram Gaunt's private realm of loss than he wanted to go. The feeling surprised him. He retreated a little, dropping some of the cards he had been shuffling back into their ivory box, and was glad of the excuse to busy himself picking them up. Gaunt suddenly turned from the mess, a look of triumph in his eyes. He held up an old, tarnished signet ring between his fingers. What you were looking for, Commissar? Milo asked brightly, feeling a comment was expected. Oh, yes. Dear old Uncle Dersius. That bastard. Gave it me as a distraction that night. Gaunt stopped suddenly, thoughts clouding his face. He sat down on the bunk next to Milo, glancing over and chuckling sadly as he saw the deck the boy was sorting. Souvenirs. Emperor knows why I keep them. Never glance at them for years, and then they only dredge up black memories. He took the cards and rifled through them, holding up some to show Milo, laughing sourly as he did so, as if the Tanith youth could understand the reason for humor. One card showed a Hayeken flag flying from some tower or other. Another showed a heraldic design with an orc's skull. Another a moon struck by lightning from the beak of an imperial eagle.
Oh, look at that, we've got 4 likes now. That's nice.
Our noble victory in the Gilatus.
Hey, welcome from the War Thunder chat. How do you do?
And the ring? Milo asked. Gaunt put the cards.
I don't know how to pronounce your name. I do
He turned the
apologise.
milling on the signet mount, and a short beam of light stabbed out of the ring. Freth, still power in the cell after all this time. Milo smiled, uncertain. It's a decryption ring, officer level. A key to let senior staff
regardless,
access private
welcome.
or veiled data. A general's plaything. They used to be quite popular. This was issued to the commander-in-chief of the noble Jantine regiments. A
I
lord of
am
the
not
very
too bad,
highest
thank
standing.
you. Just getting myself
That old
started on
bastard gave
YouTube.
it to a little boy.
You did, Alvin. Thank you.
Gaunt dug the crystal out.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing too bad, thank
Held it
you.
over the ring's beam.
I just enjoy painting Warhammer, and
There was a surprisingly
it's
impish
relaxing.
glee in Gaunt's
I
eyes
just
that made Milo snort with
while we're chatting, I'll turn that down.
laughter.
Yeah, I'm just sat painting some Warhammer.
Onto the
Trying to get my YouTube bigger.
and engaged with the
It's taking time. Maybe one day. I'm feeling hopeful.
set on the ring
Ah, thank you, dude.
outrageously showy gem. It was illuminated.
Thank you. I enjoyed the painting. I'm gonna be cheeky here. If you search up Marshall's miniatures on TikTok, I do come up, and I've got I've got some stuff
The Titan small holographic
I've got some stuff I've fully painted on there.
This document may only be opened by vermilion level decryption, as said by order of Senthis, Administratum Electrum, Pacificus Calendar 403457.
Yeah, Alvin, I played with you years ago, man.
Attempts to tamper with this data.
Bloody hell, you were a kid when I played with you.
Gaunt cursed and slipped the crystal off the mount, cancelling the ring's beam. Too old. Too damn old. I thought I had it. I don't understand, sir. The clearance levels remain the same.
I don't know what's even. I don't know what's sadder. The fact that by this one guy going awesome minifigures, he's shown more interest than my family has over 7 years of me painting.
Damn! Gaunt looked like he was going to continue cursing, but there was a sharp knock at the door of his quarters. Gaunt pocketed the crystal smartly and opened the door. Trooper Ewan, one of the corridor sentries.
Give the figures a few days and they'll look even better.
We've checked them for weapons, and they're clean. Will you see them? Gaunt nodded, pulling on his cap and long coat. He stepped out into the corridor. When he saw the identity of the visitors, Gaunt waved his men back and walked down to greet them. It was Colonel Zoran, the Vitrian commander, and 3 of his officers. Well met, Commissar, Zoran said carefully. He and his men were dressed in ochre fatigues.
I know some people use those airbrushes. I refuse to. I do everything by hand.
Last-minute change. We were bound for the Jaffet, but there was a problem with the boarding tubes. They rerouted us here.
Appreciate
The
it.
regiment scheduled for the absolute.
Big Eater. That's what I'm going to call you, Big Eater. If you stick around, what I will do is, if you end up sticking around, I will get in some.
When I learned we were sharing the same transport as the Talis, I thought perhaps
I'll get in some like World War II planes or something,
mutual victory to celebrate.
and I'll sit and paint them up,
Zoran dropped his voice.
or a tank.
My quarters this morning. A man dressed in unmarked navy overalls was searching my belongings. He rounded on me when I came in. There was a struggle.
Yeah, I appreciate it, dude.
He escaped.
I'll be sure to get some. You won't have heard of it. It's called Bolt Action. It's World War II figures.
What I might have. Something he had failed.
Let me make a note. Actually, name like a faction. So like British, American, Soviet, German.
When Gaunt grabbed the Vitrian colonel by the front of his tunic,
Let me make a note in my notebook.
Gaunt slammed the door shut after them. Alone in the room, Gaunt turned on Zoran.
Yeah. Well, like World War II. So it's like figures, but it's
Colonel,
World War II.
start making
If you're subscribing and helping me grow, man, just
friendship.
name a faction and I'll paint something up in name with you.
I assure you, a young friend
So like
of whom
like a British tank, some German, American.
of a mutual acquaintance. I know him as Bel Totute. You know him as Ferid.
Anything specific American? A plane, tank,
It's
Humvee.
a flare began.
Uh,
A lot to think about. He answered by a snigger that did nothing to calm his nerves. The snigger came from a tall, hooded shape.
Thunderbolt.
A figure silhouetted against the window.
Let me have a look. Let me clean my paintbrush. I'll have a look online, see what, and I'll tell you what they've got for America, mate. Let me just clean my brush, that'll do.
Flint bit back on a sharp answer. He was afraid, terribly afraid of the man in the multicolored shadows of the window. He shifted uneasily, dying for a breath of fresh air. His throat parched. The chamber was thick with the smoke from the Obscura water pipe on its slate plinth by the steps to the window. The nectar-sweet opiate smoke swirled around him and stole all he could.
Alright, Warlord Games.
His mind was slack and torpid from breathing it in. Warrant Officer Lekulanzi
USA.
and the three shrouded astropaths grouped in a huddle in the shadows to his left didn't seem to mind.
What have we
The astropaths
got?
were a law unto themselves, and Flens had recognized the pallor of an Obscura addict in Lekulanzi's face the moment the warrant officer had arrived at his quarters to summon him. Flens had
I don't
never
want
sought
an entire
addict
army.
He had never forgotten the sweet stench, nor the pallor of the half-hearted resistance. The figure at the window stepped slowly down to face him.
Okay,
2 meters tall without his jackboots, found himself looking up into the darkness of the cowl. "Well, Colonel," whispered the voice inside the hood. I don't really understand.
I don't know what I could say really. So you like planes?
He reached up with his ringed heavy fingers and turned back his cowl.
I think the only plane I've seen at the
Haldane's face was high and long, like some
is that a
equine
plastic
beast.
skull.
His wet, sneering mouth was full of blunt teeth, and his
Oh, that's
eyes
a glider.
were round and dark. Fluid tubes and fiber wires laced his long, sloped skull like hair braids. His huge skull was hairless, but Flens could see the matted fur that coated his neck and throat. He was human, but his features had been surgically altered to inspire terror and obedience in those he studied. At least Flens hoped it was a surgical alteration.
You seem uneasy, Colonel. Is it the circumstance or my words?
I don't want to join your mailing list. Go away.
I've never been admitted to a sacrosanctorium before, my lord, he began. Haldane extended his arms wide, too wide for anything but a skeletal giant like Haldane, Flens shuddered, to encompass the chamber. Those present were standing in one of the Absalom's astropath sanctums, a chamber screened from all intrusion. The walls were null field dead spaces, designed to shut out both.
I'm still having a look for you,
and the
dude.
screaming void of the immaterial. Soundproof, psychoproof, wireproof. These inviolable cocoons were dedicated and reserved for the astropathic retinue alone. They were prohibited by imperial law. Only a
Okay, how about I do
a blunt human, such as Flem.
I can't find any planes, but how about I do a
Flem
Humvee?
liked the word and hadn't been aware of it until Lekulanzi had used it. Blunt. A psycher's word for the
Oh no, actually,
blunt.
an anti-tank gun.
Ray of hope. He could be elsewhere. Any elsewhere.
Yeah, Humvees. You know the the little cars you drive around with. You got
Indicating that
machine gun on the back.
you were fidgeting and murmuring.
They sense your reluctance.
No, no, they don't do planes.
They sense this.
It's tanks and infantry.
I have no prejudices, Inquisitor.
Yes, you act. against
So we have
You detest sightseers.
um,
Despise the gift of the astropath.
a bog standard M5 anti-tank gun, or
Shall I
there's a howitzer.
shoot one missing?
Friends, sure.
No need, Inquisitor. Just in charge.
Or there's an M2A1.
Droplets of spittle flecking off his thick teeth. Flens shuddered. Haldane turned his gaze away slowly, and then snapped back
I
suddenly.
mean, it's up to you which one, mate.
Possible light flooded into Flens' skull. For 1 second, he saw eternity. He saw the angles of space, the way they intersected with time. He saw the tides of the Imperium, and the wasted fringes of the immaterial, the fluid spasms of the warp. He saw his mother, his sister, both long dead. He saw light and darkness, and nothingness. He saw colours without name. He saw the birth torments of the gene stealer, whose blood would scar his face. He saw
Yeah,
himself on the drill
yeah.
Skoda,
Can do.
He saw an explosion of blood, familiar blood. He started to cry. Saw bones buried.
Hello, Grandma. What's up?
He realized they too were below.
Painting.
Looked into the
That's all I'm
sockets.
doing.
He saw maggots. He screamed. He
Interrupted
vomited.
this occasion.
He saw a red dark sky and an impossible
I didn't think it needed emptying.
He saw a star
Eh?
I didn't think it needed emptying.
He saw too much.
Really?
Really?
Draco fled, fell to the floor.
I've not been upstairs. I've not moved in an hour.
I'm glad we got that straight.
Cup of
Whispered
tea?
Haldane. He raised his
Hot
cowl.
chocolate.
Let me start over. I serve Trevere as you do. For him, I will bend the stars. For him, I will torch planets. For him, I will master the unmasterable. Flensburg, get up. Listen to me. The most priceless artifact in space awaits our Lord in the Menazoid clasp. Its description and circumstance lies.
Yeah, I guess I'll get an M5 then.
We will unlock that secret. I have already expended precious energies trying to reach it. This gaunt is resourceful. You will allow yourself to be used in this matter. You and the patricians. You already have a few.
It takes a lot of patience.
Not this. Not
It's
this.
very relaxing.
Rasped from the floor.
Trevere
Yeah, I started these when I was a kid, dude.
Do you remember what he said?
I'll find my first ever painted one as well
Haldane's
for
voice
you.
changed and became a perfect copy of Trevere's. If you win this for me, Flens, I'll not forget it. There are great possibilities in my future if I am not tied here. I would share them with you.
Now is the time, Flens.
Haldane said in his own voice once more.
Share the possibilities. Help me to acquire what my Lord Trevere demands. There will be a place for you. A place in glory. A place at the side of the new War Master.
Please, Flens cried. He could hear the astropaths laughing at him.
Are you still undecided?
Haldane asked. He stepped towards the curled fetal kernel.
An American character? That sounds interesting.
He shrugged. Flens began to shriek. 9.
This isn't even mine. This is a commission for someone.
Fagor said out of the silence. Rawn snapped an angry glance round at his adjutant, but he knew what the lean man meant. It had been 4 hours since the rest of the officers had been called into their meeting with Gaunt. How convenient that he and his platoon had been excluded. Of course, if what Corbeck said was true, and there was trouble aboard, a good picket was essential. But in the
Yeah,
natural
paint it.
order of things, it should have been Folor's platoon, the 16th, who took first shift. Rawn grunted a response and led his team of 5 men down to the junction of the next corridor. They'd swept this area 6 times since they had begun. Just drafty hull spaces, dark corners, empty stores, dusty floors, and locked hatches. He checked the time. A radio message from Lirod 20 minutes earlier had informed him that the shift change would take place on the next hour. He ached. He knew the men with him were tired and cold and in need of stove warmth, caffeine, and relaxation. By extension, all of his platoon, all 50 of them, spread out patrolling the perimeter of the Ghost's barrack deck in squads of 5, would be demoralized and hungry. Rawn thought, as he often did, of Gaunt's motives. From the start, back at the bloody hour of the founding itself, he had shown no loyalty to the Commissar. He had astonished
Well, if you ever need anything painting,
him the tertiary command of the regiment.
I have
He laughed
Facebook,
at first,
Instagram,
that laughter by imagining had recognized his leadership quality.
obviously
Sometime
I'm here on
later,
YouTube.
Fagor, the only man in the regiment he thought
Pop
of
me a
as
message, dude.
and then only barely, had reminded him of the old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies close.
I think I
There was no
think I know what
escape from the
Kirby
guard,
is.
so Rawn had got on with making the best of his job. But he always wondered at Gaunt. If he'd been the colonel,
Are they plastic? Are they like this? Are they plastic or are they resin?
Trooper Lonigan was checking the locks on a storage bin. Rawn scanned the length of the corridor they had just advanced through. Fagor watched his commander slyly. Rawn had been good to him, and they had worked together in the militia of Tanith Attica before the founding. Quite a tasty racket they had running there, until the Fething Imperium rolled up and ruined it. Fagor was the bastard son of a black marketeer, and only his sharp mind and formidable physical ability had got him a place in the militia, and then the Imperial Guard. Rawn's background had been select. He didn't talk about it much, but Fagor knew enough to know that Rawn's family had been rich merchants, local politicians, local lords. Rawn had always had money, stipends from his father's empire of timber mills. But as the third son, he was never going to be the one to inherit the fortune. The militia service and the opportunities for self-advancement had been the best option. Fagor didn't trust Rawn. Fagor didn't trust anyone, but he never thought of the Major as evil, just bitter. Bitterness was what had ruined him. Bitterness was what had scalded his nature early on. Like Fagor, the men of Rawn's platoon were the misfits and troublemakers of the surviving Tanith. They gravitated towards Rawn, seeing him as a natural leader, the man who would make the best chances for them. During the draft process, Rawn had selected most of them for his own squads. One day, Fagor thought, one day Rawn will kill Gaunt and take his place. Gaunt, Korbeck, any who opposed. Rawn will kill Gaunt, or Gaunt will kill Rawn. Whatever, there will be a reckoning. Some said Rawn had already tried. Fagor was about to suggest they double back into the storerooms to the left, when Trooper Lonigan cried out and spun across the deck, hit by something from behind. He curled convulsing in the grill walkway, and Fagor could clearly see the short boot knife jutting from the man's ribs where it had impacted. Rawn was already yelling when the attackers emerged around them from all sides. 10 men, dressed in the work uniforms of the pure patricians. They had knives, stakes, clubs made from bunk legs. A frenzy of close-quarter brutality exploded in the narrow confines of the hallway. Trooper Coln was smashed into a wall by a blow to the head and sank without a murmur before he could even turn. Trooper Thruel struck one attacker hard with his shock pole and knocked him over in a cascade of sparks before 3 knife jabs from as many assailants ripped into him and dropped him in a bloody mass. Fagor could see 2 of the patricians clubbing the wounded, helpless Lonigan repeatedly. Fagor hurled his shock pole at the nearest patrician, blasting him backwards and burning through the belly of his uniform with the discharge, and then pulled out his silver Tanith blade. He screamed an obscenity and hurled forward, ripping open a throat with his first attack. With a savage turn, using the moves that had won him respect in the back streets of Tanith Attica, he wheeled, kicked the legs out from under another, and took a knife-wielding hand off at the wrist. Rawn! Rawn! He bellowed, fumbling for his radio beam. He was hit from behind. Stunned, he took 2 more strikes and dropped, rolling. Feet kicked into him. Something that felt quite hot dug into his chest. He bellowed with pain and rage. The sound was diffused by the gout of blood in his mouth. Rawn struck down one with his pole, wheeling and blocking. He cursed them with every oath in his vocabulary. A blade ripped open his tunic and spilled blood from a long, raw scratch. A heavy blow struck his temple, and he went over, vision foggy. The Major tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. The cold grill of the deck pushed into his cheek and his slack mouth. Wet warmth ran down his neck. His unfocused eyes looked up at the bulky patrician who stood over him. A long-armed wrench raised ready to pulp his skull. "Stay your hand, Brockus," the voice said. The wrench lowered reluctantly. Immobile, Rawn wished he could see more. Another figure replaced the shape of his wrench-swinging attacker. Rawn's eyes were dim and filmy. He wished he could see clearly. The man who stooped by him looked like an officer. Colonel Flenz hunkered down beside Rawn, looking sadly at the blood matting the hair and the twisted spread of the limbs. "See the badge, Brockus," Flenz said. "He's the Major, Rawn. Don't kill him. Not yet, at least." 10. "How do you know him?" Gaunt demanded. Colonel Zorin made a slight shrugging gesture, the typically unemphatic body language of the Vitrians. "Likely the same way you do. A chance encounter, a carefully established measure of trust, an informal working relationship during a crisis. Gaunt rubbed his angular chin and shook his head. If this conversation is going to get us anywhere, you'll have to be more specific. If you honestly do appreciate the critical nature of this situation, you understand why I need to be sure and certain of those around me. Zoran nodded. He turned as if to survey the room, but the close confines of Gaunt's quarters allowed for little contemplation. It was during the famine wars of Idlewild, perhaps 3 standard years ago. My dragoons were sent in as a peacekeeping presence in the main city-state, Kenati. That was just before the food riots began in earnest, before the fall of the local government. The man you know as Ferid was masquerading as a local grain broker called Bel Totute, a trade banker with a place on the Idlewild Senate. His cover was perfect. I had no idea he was an off-world operative. No idea he wasn't a native. He had the language, the customs, the gestures. I know how Ferid works. Observational perfection is his speciality, and that mimicry thing. Then you'll know his modus operandi too. To work with what he calls the trustworthy salt of the Imperium. Gaunt nodded, a half smile curving his mouth. To work in such environments, so alone, so vulnerable. Our mutual friend needs to nurture the support of those elements of the Imperium uncorrupted. Rooting out corruption and tainting Imperium-sponsored bureaucracies. He can't trust the Administratum, Administorum, or any ranking officials who might be part of the conspiratorial infrastructure. He told me that he always found his best allies in the Guard in those circumstances, in men drafted into crisis flashpoints, plain soldiery, who like as not were newcomers to any such event, and thus not part of the problem. That is what he found in me and some of my officer cadre. It took him a long time, a much careful investigation to trust me, and just as long to win my trust back. Eventually, in the midst of the food riots, we Vitrians were the only elements he could count on. The famine wars had been orchestrated by a government faction with ties into the Departmental Minotaur. They were able to field 2 regiments of Imperial Guard turned to their purpose. We defeated them. The Battle of Altatha. I have read some of the details. I had no idea what was behind the famine wars. Zoran.
Oh, that's a nice drink, that was.
Information is often suppressed. For the good of morale, we parted company as allies. I never thought of meeting again. Gaunt sat down on his cot. He leaned his elbows onto his knees, deep in thought. And now you have. I received a message, encrypted, during my disembarkation from shore leave on Pyrites. Shortly after that, a meeting. In person. Zoran shook his head. An intermediary. And how did you know to trust this intermediary? He used certain identifiers. Code words Beltotute and I have developed and used on Idlewild. Cipher syllables from Vitrian combat camp that only he would have known the significance of.
Yeah, mate, I'll be on tomorrow. Of course.
Our art of war. Only he could have sent the message and couched it so. That's Ferid. So,
Come on, dude, grind it out. Get the FA-18. I believe in you. You've got this.
Powerful man as he sat on the cot, his chin resting on his hands. He'd come to admire him during the Fortis action, and Ferid's message had contained details specific to Gaunt. It was clear the Imperial covert agent trusted Commissar Colonel Ibram Gaunt more than almost anyone in the sector. More than myself, Zoran thought. I know this much, Gaunt. A group of high-ranking conspirators in the Sabbath Worlds Crusade High Command is hunting for something precious. Something so vital, they may be prepared to twist the overall purpose of the crusade to achieve it. The key that unlocks that something has been deflected out of their waiting hands and diverted to you for safekeeping, as you were the only one of Ferid's operatives in range to deal with it. Gaunt rose angrily. I'm no one's operative, he snarled. Zoran waved him back with a deft, apologetic gesture to the mouth that indicated a misprison with language. Gaunt reminded himself that low Gothic was not the Colonel's first tongue. A trusted partner, he corrected. Ferid has been careful to establish a wide, remote circle of friends on whom he can call at all times like this. the only one able to intercept and safeguard the key on Pirates. After some further manipulation, he made sure I was on the same transport as you to assist. How else do you think we Vitrians ended up on the Absolute so conveniently? I imagine Ferry and his agents in the War Master's command staff risked great exposure arranging for us to be diverted to this ship. It would be about as overt an action as a covert dare. Did he tell you anything else, this intermediary? Gaunt said that I was to offer you all assistance, up to and beyond countermanding the direct orders of my superiors. There was a long, quiet space as the enormity of this sunk in. And then, Gaunt asked, the instructions said that you would make the right choice. That Ferid, unable to directly intercede here, would trust you, carry this forward until his network was able to involve itself again. That you would assess the situation and act accordingly.
Yes, it's taken a long time doing all the.
I know nothing.
Oh, Polish. Hey, there's nothing wrong with Polish people.
This shadow play isn't what I'm good at. Because you're a soldier. What? Zoran repeated.
Ooh.
Because you're a soldier. Like me. You deal in orders and commands and direct action. This doesn't sit easy with any of us that Ferid employs. Us, Imperial Salt, may be trustworthy and able to be recruited to his cause, but we lack the sophistication to understand the war. This isn't something we solve with flamers and fire teams. Gaunt cursed Ferid's name. Zoran echoed him, and they both began to laugh. Unless you can, Zoran said, suddenly serious. Why? Why? Because he trusts you. Because you're a colonel, second, and a
Okay.
first.
Get the plane you're after then, dude.
It's all politics, intrigue. We were both on Pirate's Gaunt. Why did he divert the key to you and not me? Why am I here to help you and not the other way around? Gaunt cursed Ferid's name again, but this time it was low and bitter. He was about to speak again when there was a fierce hammering at the door to the quarters. Gaunt swept to his feet and pulled the door open. Corbeck stood outside, his face flushed and fierce. What? Managed Gaunt. You've had a commissar. We've got 3 dead and another critical. The Jantine are playing for keeps. 11. Corbeck led Gaunt, Zoran, and a gaggle of others into the infirmary annex, where Dorden awaited them. Cold, true, Lonergan, Dorden said, gesturing to 3 shapes under sheets on the floor. Fagor's over there. Gaunt looked across at Rawn's adjutant, who lay, sucking breath through a transparent pipe on a gurney in the corner. Puncture wound, knife, lungs are feeling.
Let me go get my handle now. One sec.
Corbeck edged forward. Like I said, sir, no sign. It was hit and run. They must have taken him with them, but they left this to let us know. Corbeck showed the commissar the Jantine cap badge. Pinned it to Con's forehead, he said with loathing. Zoran was puzzled. Why such an outward show of force? The Jantine are a part of all this, but they also have a declared rivalry with the Ghosts. This comes to light. It'll look like an inter-regiment feuding. There'll be reprimands, but it will cloud the true matter. They want to take credit. Under cover of an open feud, they can do anything they like. Gaunt realized they were all looking at him. His mind was racing. So we do the same. Column, maintain the perimeter patrols on this deck. Double strength, but also organize a raid on the Jantine. Lead it yourself. Kill some for me. A great smile crossed Corbeck's face. Let's play along with their game and use it to our own ends. Doctor, he gestured to Dorden. You're going to get medical supplies with my authority now you have a critical case. What are you going to do? Dorden asked, wiping his hands on a gauze towel. Gaunt was thinking hard. He needed a plan now, a second option now that Dersius's ring had failed. He cursed his overconfidence in it. Now they had to start from scratch, both to safeguard themselves and to learn the crystal's secrets. But Gaunt was determined now. He would see this through. He would take the fight to the enemy. I need access to the bridge, to the captain himself. Colonel Zoran. Yes. Colonel Zoran moved up close to join Gaunt. He was entirely unprepared for the punch Chief Medical Officer Galen Gartell of the Jantine Patricians turned slowly from his patient in the bright, clean medical bay of the Jantine barrack deck. He had been tending the man since he had been brought in. A lout, a barbarian, one of the Tanith, the stretcher bearers had told him. The patient was a slim, powerful man with hard, angular good looks and a blue starburst tattoo over one eye. Currently, the lean, handsome temple was disfigured by a bloody impact wound. "Keep him alive," Major Brockus had hissed as he had helped to carry the man in. Such damage, such a barbarian, Gartell had used as he had begun work, cleaning and healing. He disliked using his skill on animals like this, but clearly his noble regiment had shown mercy to some raiding rival scum, and were going to heal his wounds and send him off as a gesture of their benign superiority to the deck rats they were bunked with. The voice that made him turn was that of Colonel Flens. "Is he alive, Doctor?" "Just. I don't know why I should be saving a wretch like this, wasting valuable medical commodities." Flens hushed him and moved into the infirmary. A tall, hooded figure followed him. Gartell took a step back. The figure was well over 2 meters tall, and there was a suggestion of smoke around him that fluctuated and masked his presence. Who is this? Gartell wondered. The shadow cloak. Only a formidable scion of the Imperium would have such a device. "What do you need?" Flens asked, addressing the figure. It hovered forward, past Gartell, and looked down at the patient. "Radial clamps, a neural probe. I have some long, single-edged scalpels," it said in a hollow voice. "What?" Gartell stammered. "What in the name of the Emperor are you about to do?" "Teach this thing. Teach it well," the figure replied, reaching out a huge, twisted hand to stroke the ghost's brow. The fingernails were hooked and brown, like claws. Gartell felt anger rise. "I am Chief Medical Officer here. No one performs any procedure in this infirmary without my—" The hooded figure flicked its arm. Galen Gartell suddenly found himself staring at his booted toes. It took the rest of his life for him to realize that something was wrong. Only when his headless body fell onto the deck next to him did he realize that his head cut, busted. No. "Flens, clear that up, would you?" Inquisitor Haldane asked, gesturing to the corpse at his feet with a swish of the blood-wet, long-bladed scalpel in his hands. He turned back to the patient. "Hello, Major Gorn," he crooned softly. "Let me show you your heart's desire." 13. Reclining in his leather-upholstered command throne, Lord Captain Itumadi Grasticus, commander of the Adeptus Mechanicus Mass Conveyance Absalon, raised his facilitator wand in a huge, baby-fat hand and gestured gently at the many honorific plates which hovered around him on suspense.
Yep, I'm back.
Bobbing gently like a cluster of
And I have got
the matte dark surface of the chosen plate blinked, and a slow swirl of
paint
amber
handle.
runes played across it. Grasticus carefully noted the current warp displacement of his vast ship, and then selected another plate to apprise himself of the engine tolerances. Through reinforced metal cables that grew from the deck plates under his throne and clung like thick growths of creeper to the back of his chair, Grasticus felt his ship. The data cables, many of them tagged with paper labels bearing codes or prayers, spilled over the headrest of his throne,
Oh, gone
and
itch.
entered his cranium, neck, spine, and puffy cheeks through suited biosockets. They fed him the sum total of the ship's being, the structural integrity, the atmospheric levels, the very moves of the great spacecraft. Through them, he experienced the actions of every linked crewman and servitor aboard, and the distant rhythms of the engines set the pace of his own pulse. Grasticus was immense. 300 kilos of loose meat hung from his great frame. He seldom left his throne, seldom ventured outside the quiet peace of his private strategium, an armored dome at the heart of the busy bridge vault, set high on the command
No,
spire.
yeah, a pretty odd handle, dude.
130
They're just, it's
standard years
easier to grip.
he had inherited this vessel from the late
No, obviously, you're gripping that like that. I can't grip that properly. It's not like, close my entire hand around.
had made him throne-bound. His body, as if sensing he was now one with such a vast machine, had slowed his metabolism and increased his mass, as if it wanted him to echo the swollen bulk of the Absalom. The conveyance vessels of the Adeptus Mechanicus were not like ships of the Imperial Navy, immeasurably older and often much larger. They had been made to carry the engines of war from Mars to wherever they were needed. Their captains were more like the princeps of great walking titans, hardwired to the living machines through mind impulse links. They were living ships. Grasticus wandered another screen which allowed him direct observation of his beloved navigators, husks of men wired into their shrine, set in an alcove a few marble steps down from the main bridge. Their chanting voices sang him the Unitarian coordinates and their progress, forming them into a data plainsong which resonated a pale harmony through his mind. He listened, understood, was reassured. There was a slight course adjustment, which he relayed to the senior helm officers. The Menazoid class was now just 2 day cycles away. The ether showed no signs of storm fronts or war pools.
Bloody hell, I got
Signal
itch on my
from the
back.
Astronomican beacon,
Ah.
psychic light guided all ships through the Imperium, was clear and clean. Blessed are the sons of the Navis Nobilitae, murmured Grasticus in his thick voice, pronouncing part of the Navis Blessing Creed. For from them shines the ray of hope that lights our golden path. Grasticus frowned suddenly. There was an uproar outside his hard-wired room. Human voices raised in urgent conference. His flesh-heavy brow furrowed like sand dunes slipping, and he wandered his throne to revolve, to face the arched opening to the strategium. Warrant Officer Lekulansi, he said into his intercom horn, hanging on taut brass wires from the vaulted roof. Enter and explain this disturbance. He dropped the storm shield guarding the entry arch with a flick of his wand, and Lekulansi hurried in, looking alarmed. The warrant officer gazed up at the obese bulk in the hammock-like throne above him, and toyed with compulsive agitation at the hem of his uniform and his own facilitator wand. He seldom saw the captain face to face. Lord Captain, a senior officer of the Imperial Guard petitions for audience with you. He wishes to make a formal complaint. An item of cargo wishes to complain, Grasticus said with slow wonder. A passenger, Lekulansi said, shuddering at the direct sound of the captain's seldom heard voice. Grasticus brushed the correction aside, as he always did. He wasn't used to carrying humans. Compared to the beloved god machines it was his given task to convey, they seemed insignificant. But the humans had liberated Fortis Binary, and the tech priests had sent him and his ship to assist them. It was a kind of gratitude, he supposed. Grasticus disliked Lekulansi. The whelp had been transferred to his command 3 months earlier on the orders of the Adeptus after Grasticus' acting warrant officer was killed during a warp storm. He doubted the man's ability. He loathed his spare, fragile build. Admit him, Grasticus said, diverted by the unusual event. It would make a change to speak to people, to use his mouth, to see a body, to smell its warm, fleshy breath. Colonel Zoran entered the strategium, flanked by 2 Navy troopers with shotguns. The man's face was marked by a bruise and a dressed cut. Speak, said Grasticus. Lord Captain, the soldier began, uttering in the delicious accent tones of a far worlder. Grasticus hooded his eyes and smiled. The noise delighted him. Colonel Zoran, Vitrian Dragoons. We have the privilege of transport on your great vessel. However, I wish to complain strongly about the lack of inter-barrack security. Feuding has begun with those uncouth barbarians, the Tanith. Their commanding officer struck me when I approached him to complain about several brawling incidents. Through his data conduits, Grasticus felt the waft of the psychic truth fields that layered and screened his strategium. The man was speaking honestly. The Tanith commander, Gaunt, had indeed struck him. There were lower levels of inconsistency and falsehood registered by the fields, but Grasticus put that down to the man's nervousness about approaching him directly. This is a matter for my security agent, the warrant officer here. Shipboard manners and protocol are his domain. Do not trouble me with such irrelevancies. Zoran cast a look at the agitated Lekulansi, who dearly wished to be elsewhere. Before either could speak, a new figure marched directly into the strategium, a tall man in the long coat and cap of an Imperial commissar. The troopers turned their weapons on him reflexively, but he did not even blink. Leku Lanzi is a fop. He is unable to perform his duties, let alone command peace on this ship. You must deal with it. The newcomer was astonishingly bold and direct. No formal address, no humble approach. Grasticus was impressed, and wrong-footed. "I'm Gaunt," the newcomer said. "My Talith barracks have been raided, and attempts have been made on my own life. 3 of my men are dead, another critical and another missing. I mistook Zoran and his men as the culprits, hence my assault on him. The guilty party is, in fact, the Jantine Regiment. I ask you now, directly, to confine them and put their commanding officers on report." Again, Grasticus felt a hint of deceit in the flow of the astropathic truth fields, but once more he put this down to the disarming awe of being in his presence. Essentially, this Gaunt was reading as utterly truthful and shamelessly direct. "You have men dead?" Grasticus asked, almost alarmed. 3. More urgently, I require your authorization to admit my medical officer to the stores of the Mutatorium to obtain medical commodities to save my injured soldier. This insect is shaming me. In my own strategium, Grasticus thought, with sudden revulsion. His mind whirled, and he shut out 60% of the data flow entering his skull so he could concentrate. This was the first time in a dozen years he had to deal with a problem involving his cargo. Passengers. Passengers. That was what Leku Lanzi had called them. Grasticus writhed gently in his throat. This was unseemly. This was insulting. This matter should have been contained long before now, before cargo was damaged.
Yep, welcome to the live, everybody. How do you do?
Complaints were brought to his feet.
7 people. Hey, how you doing?
Facilitator and flicked it at a hovering plate. He would not lose face before these walking flesh worms. He would show he was the captain, the Lord Captain, and that they all owed their safety and lives to him. "I have given your medical officer authority. He has my full..."
No, I just hope some of them speak up. Never mind. 5.
Gaunt smiled. "That's a start. Now confine the Jantine and punish their officers." Grasticus was amazed. He raised himself up on his ham-like elbows to study Gaunt, hefting his upper body free of the leather for the first time in 15 months. There was a squeak of sweat-wet leather, and the scent of stale filth wafted into the air of the strategium. "I will not brook such insubordination," Grasticus hissed, his cotton-soft words spitting from the loose folds of spare flesh that surrounded his small, glistening mouth like curtains on a proscenium arch. "No one demands of me." "That's not good enough. Don't belabor us with threats. We require action." This from Zoran now, stood side by side with the hawk-faced Gaunt. Grasticus reacted in surprise. He had thought the Vitrian more subdued, more deferential, but now he too challenged directly. "Contain the Jantine and curtail their feuding."
Welcome to the live, everybody. How are you doing?
"Thousands of trained troopers, hungry for blood. More than your trooper details can handle." Zoran cast a contemptuous glance at the Navy escort. "Do you threaten me?" Grasticus almost gasped. The very thought of it. "I will see you in chains for such a remark." "Is that how you deal with things you don't want to hear?" Gaunt snapped, pushing aside a trooper to approach Grasticus's throat. The trooper grappled with the larger commissar, but Gaunt sent him sprawling with a deft swing of his arm. "Are you the commander of this vessel, or a weak, fat nothing who hides at its heart?" Leku Lanzi fell back against the wall of the strategium, aghast and hyperventilating. No one spoke to the Lord Captain like that. No one. Grasticus writhed ever upwards from his bed throne, sweeping the hovering plates aside with his hands so that they parted and cowered at the edges of the chamber behind him. He glared down at the guard officers, rage rippling through his vast mass. "Well?"
10 people. Welcome. Welcome. How are you doing?
Raising his thick, swollen voice for the first time in years.
I hope you're all doing well
Cast a nervous
this
glance.
fine evening.
Weren't they pushing the Lord Captain too hard? Something in Gaunt's calm reassured him. He remembered the elements of their plan and started to send his own jibes at the captain.
Hey, Alvin, you seen this? We've got 10 people now.
Gaunt grinned inwardly.
Oh,
Now they had
it's
Grasticus'
dropped
entire
down to 4 very, very quickly.
Outside the strategium, the lower levels of the high-roof, cool-aired bridge vault, the senior helm officers looked up from their dark oiled gears and levers and basso after echo of their captain rolled out of the armored dome. The Lord Captain was clearly so angry he had diverted his attention from most of the systems temporarily. This was unheard of, unprecedented. A detachment of ship troopers milled cautiously outside the door arch of the Strategium. "Do we enter?" rasped one through his helmet intercom. None of them felt like confronting the Lord Captain's wrath. They pitied the idiot guard officers who had created this commotion. Gaunt did not care. This was exactly what he had been after. 14. Chief Medic Dorden led his party in through the armored hatchway of the Munitorium depot deck. Flanking him, Kaffran, Bryn Milo, and Bragg formed a motley honor guard of uneven height for the elderly medico. They entered a wide bay that smelled of antiseptic. The grey deck.
We had 10 people, Alvin. No one spoke, though.
Consulted his chronometer. "Cometh the hour," he said. "Come who?" Bragg asked. "What I mean is, it's now or never. We've given the commissar long enough."
Well, we have 5 people now, Alvin.
Dorden said. "I still don't get any of this," Bragg said, scratching his lantern jaw. "How's this meant to work? What's the old ghost maker trying to do?" "Let's call it a diversion," Milo said quietly. "Don't worry about the details. Just play along and act dumb." "Not a problem," Bragg announced.
Play along and act dumb.
Beyond metal cage doors at the end of the bay, 3 robed officials of the Munitorium were at work at low-set consoles. There were at least 7 Navy troopers on watch around the place. Dorden marched forward and rapped on the metal grill. "I need supplies," he called. "Hurry now, a man is dying." One of the Munitorium men got up from his console, leaving his cloak draped over the seat back. He was a short, bulky man with physical power under his khaki Munitorium tunic. Glossy chrome servitor implants were stapled into his cheek, temple, and throat. He disconnected a cable from his neck socket as he approached them. Dorden thrust his data slate under the man's nose. "Requisition of medical supplies," he snapped. The man viewed the slate. As he scrolled down the slate file, the troopers suddenly came to attention and grouped in the center of the bay. Milo could hear the muffled back and forth of their helmet boxcasters. One of them turned to the Munitorium staff. "Trouble on the bridge," he said through the speaker, his voice tinny. "Bloody guard that feuding again. We've been beat down to the back decks to act as patrol." The Munitorium officer waved them off with his hand. "Whatever." The troopers exited, leaving just one watching the grill entry. The Munitorium officer slid back the cage grill and let the 4 ghosts inside. He eyed the slate before directing them down an aisle to the left. "Lord Captain Dresticus has issued you with clearance. Down there, chamber 11. Get what you need. Just what you need. I'll be checking the inventory on the way out. No analgesics without a signed chit from the warrant officer. No purloining." "Thank you," Dorden said, snatching back the slate and beckoning the others after him. "We've got a life to save. Do you think we'd waste time trying to rustle some booty?" The official turned away, disinterested. Dorden led the trio down the dark aisle between racks of air tanks, amphorae of wine and food crates stacked up to the high roof. They entered a junction bay in the dark depths of the storage holds, and through several hatches ahead saw the vast commodity stockpiles of the huge ship. "Medical supplies down there," Kaffran said, noting the white marker tags on one of the hatch frames. "There's a console," Milo said, pointing down another of the aisles into a dark hole. They could see the dull, distant green glow of a Munitorium artificer. Dorden glanced at his chronometer again. "Right, as we planned. 5 minutes. Go."
Yay.
Dorden strode into the medical supply vault and started pulling bundles of sterile gold,
That's good then,
jars
dude.
of counter-septic wash, and packs of clean surgical tools off the black metal shelves. Bragg requisitioned a wheeled cargo trolley from an alcove near the door and followed him. Milo and Kaffran slunk down into the darker chamber.
Good job for not killing them off.
In front of the console. He fumbled in his pocket and produced the memory towel that Gaunt had given him, gingerly fitting it into the slot on the desk edge of the machine. 2 teal-colored lights winked and flashed as the artificer recognized the blank tile. His hands trembled. He tried to remember what the commissar had told him. "Will this work?" Kaffran asked, pulling out his blade and watching the door anxiously. The Munitorium databanks were slaved directly to the ship's main cogitator. Remembering Gaunt's instructions piece by piece, Milo entered key search words via the ivory-toothed keyboard. The banks had full access to the ship's information stockpile, including the security clearance Gaunt's artificer lacked. "Hurry up, boy," Catherine snapped, edgy. Milo ignored him, but that boy nagged him and made him unhappy. His trembling fingers conducted his way across the worn keys into new levels of instruction that glowed in runic curses on the flat plate of the console, just as the commissar had laid out. "Here," Milo said suddenly. "I think." He awkwardly touched the rune-inscribed command key, and the console hummed. Data began to download onto the blank tile. Gaunt would be proud. Milo had listened to his arcane ramblings about the use of machines well. In the medical store, Dorden looked up from the cargo trolley he was filling and glanced once more at his chronometer. Bragg watched him cautiously. "This is taking too feffing long," Dorden said irritably. "I can go back," Bragg suggested. "No, we've not got everything yet," Dorden said, searching the racks for jars of pneumothorax resin. Milo's fingers hovered over the keys. "We've got it," he exclaimed. Catherine didn't answer. Milo turned and saw Catherine frozen, the blunt nose of a deck shotgun pressed to his temple. The Imperial Navy trooper said nothing, but nodded his helmet-clad head at Milo, indicating he should get up from the bench rapidly. Milo rose, his hands where the trooper could see them. "That's good," the trooper said through the dull resonator of his headset. He pointed the muzzle of his gun at where he wanted Milo to stand. Catherine slammed back, jabbing his elbow at the trooper's sternum, aiming for the solar plexus in one desperate movement. The fiber-weave armor of the trooper's uniform stopped the blow, and he swung around, smashing Catherine into the wall racks with an open hand. Milo tried to move. The shotgun fired, a wide burst of incandescent fury in the darkness. 15. As they waited in the shadows, they noted that the Jantine had been issued with the finest barrack decks on the ship. The approach colonnade was a spacious embarkation hall, wide enough for the bulkiest of equipment. The glittering wall burners cast purple shadows across the tiles. Two Jantine patricians in full-dress armor, training shot poles held ready, patrolled the far end. They were exchanging inconsequential remarks when Larkin appeared down the colonnade, bumbling along as if he'd missed his way. They snapped round in disbelief, and Larkin froze, a look of horror on his leathery, narrow face. With an oath, he turned and began to run back the way he had come. The two guards thundered after him with baying blood cries. They'd gone 10 meters before the shadows behind them unfolded, and ghosts emerged, dropping stealth blows and seizing them from behind. McCall, Baru, Val, and Corbeck fell on the two Jantine, struck with shock poles and Tanith blades, and dragged the fallen men into the darkness of the main hall. "What am I always the fifth in beat?" the returning Larkin asked, stopping by Corbeck, who was wiping a trace of blood from the floor with the hem of his cape. "You got that kind of face," Val said, and Corbeck smiled. "Look here," Baru called in a hiss from the end of the hall. They moved to join him, and he grinned as he pulled his find from the corner of the archway the Jantine sentries had been watching. Guns. A battered old exotic bolt-action rifle with a long muzzle and ornately decorated stock, and a worn but serviceable pumped stub gun with a bandolier strap of shells. Neither were regular issue guard pieces, and both were much lower tech than guard standard pattern gear. Corbeck knew what they were. "Souvenirs, spoilers of war," he murmured, his hands running a check at the stub gun. All soldiers collected trophies like these, stuck them away in their kits to sell on, keep as mementos, or simply use in a clinch. Corbeck knew many of the ghosts had their own, but they had dutifully handed them in with their issued weapons when they'd come aboard. He was not the least surprised that the Jantine had kept hold of their unrecorded weapons. The sentries had left them here as backup in case of an assault their shock poles couldn't handle.
Yes, Alvin?
Carl handed the rifle to Larkin. There was no question who should carry it. The weight of a gun in his hands again seemed to calm the old sniper. He licked his almost lipless mouth, which cut the leather of his face like a knife slash. He'd been complaining incessantly since they had set out, unwilling to be part of a vendetta strike. "If they catch us, we'll be for the firing squad. This ain't right." Corbeck had been firm, fully aware of how daring the mission was. We're in a regimental feud, Larks, he had said simply. An honor thing. They killed Lanigan, Throol, and Colin. You think what they did to Fagor, and what they might be doing to the Major? The commissars asked us to avenge the blood wrong, and I, for one, am happy to oblige. Colbeck hadn't mentioned that he'd only selected Larkin because of his fine stealth abilities, nor had he made clear Gaunt's real reason for the raid. Distraction, misdirection, and, like the Gentine, to promote the notion that what was really happening aboard the Absalom was a mindless soldier's feud. Now, checking the long gun, Larkin seemed to relax. His only eloquence was with a firearm. If he was going to break ship law, then best do it full measure, with a gun in his hands, and they all knew he was the best shot in the regiment. They edged on into the Jantine barrack area. From down one long-cross hallway came the sounds of singing and carousing. From another, the clash of shot poles in a training rod. How far do we go with this? McCall whispered. Corbeck shrugged. They killed 3, wounded 2. We should match that at least. He also had an urge to discover Rawn's fate and rescue him if they could, but he suspected the Major was already long dead. McCall, the commander of the scout platoon, was the best stealther they had. With Baru at his side, the pair melted into the hall shadows and swept ahead. The other 3 waited. There seemed to be something sporadic and ill at ease in the distant rhythm of the ship's engines as they vibrated to death. I hope we're not running into some fething warp madness, Corbeck mused. Then lightened up as he realized that it may be Gaunt's work. He'd said it was going to distract and upset the captain. Baru came back to them. We've hit lucky. Really lucky, he hissed. You'd better see. McCall was waiting in cover in an archway around the next bend. Ahead was a lighted hatchway. Infirmary, he whispered. I went up close to the door. They've got Rawn in there. How many, Jantine? 2 troopers, an officer, a colonel, and someone else. Robed. I didn't like the look of him at all. A scream suddenly cut the air, sobbing down into a whimper. The 5 ghosts stiffened. It had been Rawn's voice. 16. The Navy trooper kicked Catherine's fallen body hard, and then swung his shotgun round to finish him. Weapon violation sirens were sounding shrilly in the close air of the Munitorium store. The trooper pumped the loader grip, and then was smashed sideways into the packing cartons to his left by a massive fist. Bragg lifted the crumpled form of the dazed trooper and threw him 10 meters down the
Jeez, yeah, and mate, it's boiling down here. I'm shirtless at the moment, man.
Ready, boy! Bragg called anxiously over the siren. Milo raised himself up from under the artificer. The shot had exploded the vista plate, just missing him. I'm okay, he said. Bragg got the dazed Caffran to his feet as Bryn slid the tile from the artificer slot. Go, he said. Go! In under a minute, they had rejoined Dorden, helping him to push his laden trolley back out of the vault. By then, Munitorium officials and Navy troopers were rushing in through the cage. Dorden was a master of nerve. Thank Feth, you're here, he bellowed, his voice cracking. There are Jantine in there, madmen. They attacked us. Your man engaged them, but I think they got him. Quickly, quickly now. Most of the detail moved past at a run, racking weapons. One stayed, eyeing the ghost party cautiously. You'll have to wait. We're going to check this. Dorden strode forward, steely calm now, and held up his data slate to show the man. Does this mean anything to you? A direct authorization from your captain. I've got a man dying in my infirmary. I need these supplies. You're hunting death on your hands, because by Feth, you're... The trooper waved them on and hurried after his comrades. I thought this place was meant to be secure. Dorden spat at the Munitorium official as they pushed past him towards the exit. They slammed the cart into a lift and slumped back against the walls as it began to rise. Did you get it? Dorden asked, after a few deep breaths. Milo nodded. Think so. Caffran looked at the elderly doctor with a wide-eyed grin. There are Jantine in there, madmen. They attacked us. Your man engaged them, but I think they got him. Quickly, what the Feth was all that about? Inspired, I'd say, Bragg said. Back home, there was a doctor, and also secretary of the County Prize Citizens' Players. My Prince Tagoth was highly regarded. Their relieved laughter began to fill the lift. 17. deck voxcasters started to relay the scream of a weapons violation alert. The dull choral wails echoed down the hallway, and alert runes began to blink above all of the archways. The colonel pulled his men to cover as figures strode out of the infirmary, looking around. Squads of Jantine guards came up from both sides, milling around as Vox checks tried to ascertain the nature of the incident. Corbeck saw Flens and Brockus, the Jantine senior officers, and another man, a hugely tall, grotesque figure, in shimmering smoke-like robes who filled him with dread. Weapons discharge on the Munitorium deck, a Jantine trooper with a Voxcaster on his back reported. The Navy details are closing to contain it. Sir, the channels are alive with cross reports. They're blaming it on the Jantine. They say we conducted a feud strike on Kenneth scum in the supply vaults. Flens turned. Gaunt. The devil's trying to match our game. He turned to his men. Brockus, secure the deck. Security detail with me. I'll stay. Finish my work.
Yeah.
The rogue figure said in a deep, liquid tone.
It's warm, dude.
As the various men moved off to comply with orders, the rogue figure stopped Flens with a hand to his shoulder. Or rather, what seemed more like a long-fingered claw than a hand, Corbeck noticed with a shudder. This isn't good, Flens. The figure breathed at the suddenly trembling colonel. Use violence against a soldier like Gaunt, and you can be assured he will use it back. And you seem to have underestimated his political abilities. I fear he has outplayed you. And if he has, you should fear for yourself. Flens shook himself free and hurried away. I'll deal with it, he snarled defensively over his shoulder. The rogue figure watched him leave, and then withdrew into the infirmary. What do we do? Carl hissed. Tell me we go back now, Larkin whispered urgently. Another scream issued from the chamber beyond. What do you think? Corbeck asked. 18. Sirens wailed in the normally tranquil Strategium. Grasticus shifted in his cock throne, wanding screens to him and cursing at the information he was reading. Gaunt and Zoran exchanged glances. I hope this confusion is the confusion we planned, Gaunt thought. Grasticus rose up on his elbows and bawled at the quaking Lekulanzi. Weapons fire on the Munitorium deck. My data says it's Jantine feuders. Are any of mine hurt? Gaunt asked, pushing forward, urgent. I told you the Jantine were out for blood. Shut up, Commissar, the captain said with a suddenly sour look. His day had been disrupted enough. The reports are unconfirmed. Get down there and see to it, warrant officer. Lekulanzi scurried out of the chamber. Grasticus turned back to the two Imperial Guard colonels. This matter needs my undivided attention. I will summon you when we can speak further. Zoran and Gaunt nodded and backed out of the Strategium smartly. Side by side, they crossed the nave of the bridge, through the hubbub of bridge crew, and entered the lifts. Is it working? Zoran asked as the doors closed and the choral chime sang out. Pray by the throne that it is, Gaunt said. 19. They took the infirmary in a textbook move. The room was wide, long and low. The robed figure was bent over Rawn, who was strapped, screaming to a gurney. A pair of Jantine troopers stood guard at the door. Corbeck came in between them, ignoring them both, as he dived into a roll, his shotgun raised up to fire. The robed figure turned, as if sensing the sudden intrusion. The shotgun blast blew him backwards into a stack of wheezing resuscitrex units. The guards began to turn when McCall and Baru launched in on Corbeck's heels and knifed them both. Corbeck rolled up onto his feet, slung his shotgun by the strap, and grabbed Rawn. Sacred Faith, he murmured, as he saw the head wound and the insidious pattern of scalpel cuts across the major's face, neck, and stripped body. Rawn was slipping in and out of consciousness. Come on, Rawn, come on! Corbeck snapped, hauling the major up over his shoulder. We have to move now, McCall bellowed, as secondary weapons violation sirens began to shrill. Corbeck threw the shotgun over to him. Take point. We shoot our way out if we have to. Colonel, Baru yelled. Weighed down by Rawn, Corbeck couldn't turn in time. The robed figure was clawing its way back onto its feet behind him. Its hood was thrown back, and they gasped to see the equine extension crackled around him. Corbeck felt the room temperature drop. Thething magic was all he had time to think, before a shot took the man-monster's throat clean away. Larkin stood in the doorway, the old rifle raised in his hands. "Now we're leaving, right?" he said. 20. Gaunt took the tile Milo held out for him. Then he shut the door of his quarters on the faces of the men crowded outside. Inside, Corbeck, Zoran, and Milo watched him carefully. "This had better be worth all that damn effort," Corbeck said eventually, voicing what they all thought. Gaunt nodded. The gamble had been immense, but for the Jantine's bloodthirsty and brutal methods of pursuing their intrigue, they would never have got this far. The ship was still full of commotion. Adeptus Mechanica security details blocked every corridor, conducting barrack searches. Rumor, accusation, and threat rebounded from counter-rumor, counter-accusation, and promise. Gaunt knew his hands weren't spotless in this, and he would make no attempt to hide that his men fought back against the Jantine in a feud. There would be reprimands, punishment details, rounds of questioning that would lead to nothing conclusive. But, like him, the Jantine would not take the matter beyond a simple regimental feud. Only he and those secret elements pitched against him would know precisely what had been at stake. He slotted the tile into his bucket, he said, and then set the crystal in the reed slot. He touched a few keys. There was a pause. "It isn't working," Zoran began. It wasn't. As far as Gaunt could tell, Milo had indeed downloaded the latest clearance ciphers via the Munitorium Artificer, but still, they would not open the crystal. In fact, he couldn't even open the seals and set them to
My night's alright, dude. Just painting away.
Milo asked. Gaunt paused.
I'm just painting away.
Dersius's ring from his pocket. He fitted that into the reed slot beside the one that held the crystal and activated it. Old and too out of date to open the dedicated ciphers of the crystal, the ring was nevertheless standardized in its cryptography enough to authorize use of the downloaded codes. The Vista plate scrolled nonsense for a moment, as runic engram languages translated each other and overlaid data, transcribing and interpreting, rereading and resetting. The crystal opened, spinning its contents up in a monolithic display which projected up off the Vista plate. "Oh, what's this mean?" Corbeck murmured, instantly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he saw. Milo and Gaunt were silent as they read on for detail. "Schematics," Zoran said simply, an awed note in his voice. Gaunt nodded. Violet rolled the throat. "I don't pretend to understand much of this, but from what I do, now I see why they were so keen to get it." Milo pointed to a sidebar of the display. "A chart. A location. Where is that?" Gaunt looked toward it again, slowly. Things now made sense. Like why Ferid had chosen him to be the bearer of the crystal. Things had just become a great deal harder than even he had feared. "Menazoid Epsilon," he breathed. A memory. Ked, 1173, 16 years earlier. The Kedite had not expected them to move in winter, but the High Lords of Terra's Imperial Guard, whose forces dwelt in seasonless shipholds flying the ever colder space, made no such distinction between campaigning months and resting months. They burned 2 clan towns at the mouth of the River Hiop, where the deep fjord inlets opened to the icy sea and the archipelago, and then moved into the glacial uplands to prosecute the nomads who had spent the summer harrying the main Imperial outpost with guerrilla strikes. Up here, the air was clear, like glass, and the sky was a deep, burnished turquoise. Their column of Chimera troop transports, ski-nosed half-tracks commandeered locally, hellhounds and even rust tanks with big bulldozer blades, made fast going over the sculptural ice desert, snorting exhaust smoke, ice spumes in their wake. The khaki body camouflage from their last campaign in the dust-thick heathlands covered as lenticular.
Welcome to the live.
The leopard pelt speckles of grey and blue and white. Only the silver imperial eagles and the purple insignia of the Jantine patricians remained on the flanks of the rushing, bouncing, roaring vehicles. The sentinel scouts, stalking as swift outriders to the main advance, had located a nomad haluka 3 kilometers away over a startlingly vivid glacier of green ice. General Aldo Dersius swung the column to a stop and sat on the turret top of his command tank, putting off his fur mittens so he could sort through the sheaf of flimsy vista prints the sentinels had brought back. The Haluka seemed of normal pattern, a stockade of stripped fir stems surrounding 18 bulbous habitat fence of tan mahish pines supported on umbrella domes of the animals treated with birds. There was a corral adjacent to the stockade, holding at least 60 anahig, the noxious, hunchbacked, legless bird mouse.
Clean my brush.
Damn things, ungainly and comical in appearance, but the biped steeds could run faster than unladen chimera across loose snow, turn much faster, and the scales under their oily matted down fur could shrug off lasfire, while their toothed beaks sliced a man in two like toffee. Dersius slid his flare goggles up for a better look at the vista prints, and winced at the glare of the open snow. Down on the brow of the Lehman Russ, his crew were taking time to stretch their limbs and relax. A stove boiled water for Trinity caffeine, and Dersius's
All
two
edge
adjutants,
highlight.
bodyguards,
No, we'll do the
were
bronze
applying matches to their
on.
snow-burned cheeks.
Nah, we'll do the surgeon.
Out of small round tins they had bartered from the local population. Dersius smiled to himself at this little thing. His patricians had a reputation for aristo snobbery, but they were resourceful men, and certainly not too proud to follow the local wisdom and smear their faces with cetacean blubber to block the unforgiving winter suns. His face caked in the pungent white grease, Adjutant Brockus slid his tin away in the pocket of his fur-trimmed, purple and chrome patrician battle dress, and took a wire-handled can of caffeine up to the turret. Dersius accepted it gratefully. Brockus, the young and powerfully built trooper,
Welcome,
nodded
welcome.
down at the prince spread out on the turret canopy. A target, or just another collection of flag hunters? I'm trying to decide, Dersius said. Since they had left the mouth of the Hiot 8 days before,
Ah, thank
they
you,
had
thank
made
you.
one early lucky strike at a camp of nomad guerrilla Kedite, and then wasted 4 afternoons assaulting Halukas that had sheltered nothing more than herders and hunters and ragged family groups. Dersius was eager for another success. The Imperial Guard had strength, technology, and firepower in their corps, but the nomad rebels had patriotic determination, a fanatical mindset, and the harsh environment in theirs. Dersius knew that many campaigns had faltered when the initially victorious forces had driven the natives back on the advantage of inhospitable home turf. The last thing he wanted was a war of attrition that locked him here in a police action against elusive guerrillas for years. The Kedite knew and used this beautiful, cruel environment well. Dersius knew they could be hunting them for months, all the while suffering
Welcome.
slow erosions of strength into lightning strikes by the fast-moving foe. If they only had a base, a static HQ, a city that could be assaulted. But the Kedite culture out here was fierce and nomadic. This was their realm, and they would be masters of it until he could catch them. Still, he reassured himself that War Master Slado had promised him 3 more guard units to help his Jantine 4th and 11th in their hunt. Just a day or 2 more. He looked back at the prince and saw something. This is promising, he told Brockus, sipping his caffeine. It's a large sample.
You're my broski
Large by
dude.
comparison with the herder stroke hunter Halukas we see. 60 plus animals. Those Anahig are big. They look like war mounts to me. Veritable destroyer, Brockus laughed, referring to the beautiful 16-hand beasts traditionally bred in the stud farms and baronies on Jant Nomanda's prime. Dersius enjoyed the joke. It was the sort of quip his old major, Gaunt, would have made. A pressure release from the slow-building tension bubble of a difficult campaign. He rubbed the memory away. That was done. Left behind on Kentor. Look here, he said, tapping a particular print. Brockus leaned closer. What does that look like to you? Dersius asked. The main habitat tent? Where your finger is? I don't know. A smoke flume? An airspace? Maybe. Dersius said and lifted the print so that his adjutant could get a closer look. There's certainly smoke issuing from it, but we all know how easy smoke is to make. That wing of light, there. Brockus chuckled, nodding. Throne. An uplink spine, no doubt. They've got a Vox Vista set in that place, with the mast extending up out of the opening. You've got sharp eyes, General. That's why I'm the General, Trooper Brockus. Dersius snorted with ample good humor. So, what does that give us? A larger than normal Haluka, 60 head of war mount in the pan. And since when did flak herders need an intercontinental uplink unit? Finished the adjutant. I think the Emperor has smiled at our fortune. Have Major Saurus circle the tanks into a crescent formation around the edge of the glacier. Bring the Hellhounds forward and hold the troops back for final clearing. We will engulf them. Brockus nodded and jumped back off the track bed of the Lehman Russ, running to shout his orders. Dersius poured the last dregs of his caffeine away over the side of the turret. It melted and stained the snow beside the tank's treads. Just before sunset, with the first sun a frosty pink semicircle dipping below the horizon, and the second a hot apricot glow in the wispy clouds of the blackened sky, the Haluka was a dark stain too. The Kedite had fought ferociously as any fur-clad ice soldier whose tented encampment had been pounded by tank shells and hosed by infernos unleashed from the trundling hellhounds. Most of the dead and the debris were fused into thick curls of the rapidly refreezing ice cover, twisted, broken, blackened shapes around which the suddenly liquid ice had abruptly solidified and set. Some 20 or so had made it to their Anahig mount and staged a countercharge along the north flank. A few of his infantry had been torn apart by the clacking beaks, churned under the heavy three-toed feet. Dersius had pulled the troops back and sent in the tanks with their relentless dozer blades. The sunset was lovely on Kent. Dersius pulled his vehicle up from the glacier slope until he overlooked the ocean. It was vibrant red in the fading light, alive with the flashing bioluminescence of the microgrowth and krill which prospered in the winter seas. Every now and then, the dying light caught the slow glitter of a mahish as it surfaced its great bulk to harvest the surface. Dersius watched the flopping thick red water for the sudden breaks of 20-meter flukes and dorsal spines, and the sonorous sub-bass creaks of deep-water voices. The Voxcaster set in the lit turret below him was alive with backchat, but he started as he heard a signal cut through, a low, even message couched in simple Jantine combat cant. Who knows that? Who's broadcasting? He murmured, dropping into the turret and adjusting the dial of the set. He smiled at first. Slado's promised reinforcements were coming in. The Hyrcan 5th and 6th. The message was from the Hyrcan Commissar, little Ibram Gaunt. Fog lights lit the glacier crest as the armored column of the Hyrcan hove into view, kicking up snow dust from their tracks as they bounced down towards the Jantine column. It would be good to see Ibram, Dersius thought. What's it been? 13? 14 years? He's grown up since I last saw him. Grown up like his father. Served with the Hyrcan. Made Commissar. Dersius had kept up with the long-range reports of Ibram's career. Not just an officer, as his father intended. A commissar, no less. Commissar Gaunt. Well, well, well. It would be good to see the boy again, despite everything. Gaunt's half-track slewed up in the snow next to the Lehman Russ.
I could probably keep going for an hour.
Descending to meet him, putting his cap on, adjusting his regimental chainsword in its decorative sheath. He hardly recognized the man who stepped out to meet him. Gaunt was grown, tall, powerful, thin of face, his eyes as steady and penetrating as targeting lasers. The black uniform stormcoat and cap of an Imperial Commissar suited him. Ibram, Dersius said with a slow smile. How long has it been? Years, the Commissar said flatly, face expressionless. Space is wide and too broad to be spanned. I have looked forward to this for too long. I always hoped circumstance would draw us together again, face to face. Ah, so did I, Abraham. It's a joy to see you. Dersius held his arms out wide. Because I am, as my father raised me, a fair man. I will tell you this, Uncle Dersius, Gaunt said, his voice curiously low. 4 years ago, on Darandara, I experienced a revelation. A series of revelations. I was given information. Some of it was nonsense, or was not then applicable. Some of it was salutary. It told me a truth. I have been waiting to encounter you ever since. Dersius stiffened. Ibram, but boy, what are you saying? Gaunt unsheathed his chainsword, It murmured waspishly in the cold air. I know what happened on Kentor. I know that, for fear of your own career, my father died. Dersius's adjutant was suddenly ringing. That's enough, Rocker spat. Back off. Major Tannhaus and Sergeant Clef of the Hyrcan stood ready to second Gaunt. You're speaking to an Imperial Commissar, friend, Gaunt said. Think hard about your objections. Rocker took a pace back, uncertainty warring with duty. Now I am a Commissar, Gaunt continued, addressing Dersius. I am empowered to deliver justice wherever I see it lacking. I am empowered to punish cowardice. I am granted the gift of total authority to judge, in the name of the Emperor, on the field of combat. Suddenly realizing the implications behind Gaunt's words, Dersius pulled his own chainsaw and flew at the Commissar. Gaunt swung his own blade up to block, his grip firm. Madness and fear filled the Jantine commander. How had the little bastard found out? Who could have known to tell him? The calm confidence which had filled his mind since the Ked campaign began washed away as fast as the dying light was dulling the ice glare around them. Little Ibram knew. He knew. After all this time, all his care, the boy had found out. It was the one thing he always dreaded, always promised himself would never happen. The siding chainswords struck and shrieked, throwing sparks into the cold night, grinding as the tooth belts churned and repelled each other. Broken saw teeth spun away like shrapnel. Dersius had been tutored in the dueling schools of the Jant Normanidus Military Academy. He had the ceremonial honor scars on his cheek and forearms to bear it out. A chain blade was a different thing, of course, 10 times as heavy and slow as a coupe épée, and the clash torsion of the chewing teeth was an often random factor. But Dersius had retrained his swordsmanship in the nuances of the chainsword on admission to the patricians. A duel, chainsword to chainsword, was rare these days, but not unheard of. The secrets were wrist strength, momentum, and the calculated use of reversal in chain direction to deflect the opponent and open a space. There was no feinting with a weapon as heavy as a chainsaw. Only swing and readdress. They turned, clashed, broke, circled, clashed again. The men were calling out, others running to see. No one dared step in. From the frank determination of the officers, it was clear this was an honor bout. Dersius hooked in low, cycling the action of his blade to a fast reversal, and threw Gaunt's weapon aside with a shriek of tortured metal. An opening. He sliced, and the sweep took Gaunt across the gut. His commissar's coat and tunic split open, and blood exploded from a massive cut across his lower belly. Gaunt almost fell. The pain was immense, and he knew the ripped, torn wound was terrible. He had
Yeah, it's almost 1 a.m. for me, bro.
Dersius was too big, too formidable a presence in his mind to be defeated. Uncle Dersius, the huge man, the laughing, scolding, charismatic giant who had strode into his life from time to time on Manzipor, full of tales and jokes and wonderful gifts. Dersius, who had carved toy frigates for him, told him the names of the stars, sat him on his knee.
You don't have to, dude. Honestly, get yourself some rest.
Dersius, who, with the aid of awning rods, had taught him to fence on the sun decks over the cataracts. Gaunt remembered the little twist thrust that always left him sitting on his backside, rubbing a bruised shoulder. Deft with an épée, impossible with a chainsaw. Or perhaps not. Trailing blood and tattered clothes and flesh, Gaunt twisted, light as a child, and thrust with a weapon not designed to be thrust. There was a look of almost unbearable surprise on Dersius's face. As Gaunt's chainsaw
I don't have one of those dads.
Bone, flesh, tissue, and organs until it protruded from between the man's shoulder blades. Meat flicking from the whirring teeth. Dersius dropped in a bloody, quaking mess, his corpse vibrating with the rhythm of the still active weapon impaling it. Gaunt fell to his knees, clutching his belly together as warm blood spurted through the messy gut wound. He was blacking out as Tannhaus got to him. You are avenged, father, Ibram Gaunt tried to say to the evening sky, before unconsciousness took him. Part 6. Menazoid Epsilon.
Bless him.
No one wanted Epsilon. No one wanted to die. Commissar Gaunt recalled his own deliberations in the glass bay of the Absalom with a rueful grin. He remembered how he had prayed his ghosts would be selected for the main offensive on the main planet, Menazoid Sigma.
The only thing I don't like about metallic paints is
How he would have scoffed at
you have to clean your brush often, because if you don't, it will fuck up your brush.
well, choose what
And the brush I'm using is about, well,
and invisible hands
a rough price for
when the
a proper Warhammer brush.
beachhead hexacathedrals strung out
Like official brand, I would say they're about
there had been a bewildering mass of
four
armored units assembling
four to 7 quid.
Most
The one I'm using is about 5.
petitioning for the glory
I like
of
it
Mars
personally.
and War Master Makarov's tactical council had been inundated with proposals and counter-proposals as to the disposition of the Imperial armies. Gaunt had thought of the way that Ferid, the unseen Ferid, and his network of operatives had arranged for the Vitrians to support him on the Absalom. With no direct means of communication, he trusted that they would observe him again and, where possible, facilitate his needs, tacitly understanding them to be part of the mutual scheme. So he had sent signals to the tactical division, announcing that he believed his ghosts, with their well-recognized stealth and scout attributes, would be appropriate for the Epsilon assault. Perhaps it was chance. Perhaps it was because no other regiment had volunteered. Perhaps it was that Ferid and his network had noted the request and manipulated silently behind the scenes to ensure that it happened. Perhaps it was that the conspiring enemy faction, rebuffed in their attempts to extract the secrets of the crystal from him, had decided the only way to reveal the truth was to let him have his way and follow him. Perhaps he was leading them to the trophy they so desired. It mattered little. After a week and a half of levy organization, resupply, and tactical processing at the hexacathedrals, the ghosts had been selected to participate in the assault on Menazoid Epsilon, advancing before an armored host of 40,000 vehicles from the Latari gundogs, Quetzalcoatl 17, Samothrace 4th, 5th, and 15th, Morkedit Hellhounds, Cadian armored 3rd, and Sarpoi mechanized cavalry. With the Tanith 1st in the field,
Oh, you fucking bastard.
regiments, the Afghani Ravagers 1st and 3rd,
I'm just nearly...
6 battalions of Udino Irregulars, and the Vitrian Dragoons. The inclusion of the Vitrians
I've just nearly proper fucked my brush there.
had been influenced by friendly minds. The fact that the Jantine patricians were also part of the first wave, and that Lord General Dravier was in overall charge of the Epsilon Theatre, made him think otherwise. How much of it was engineered by Ferid's hand? How much by the opposing cartel? How much was sheer happenstance?
I need to be careful. One of the spiky bell bits, I've nearly just pressed my brush in there.
6 dispersal sites for the main landing along a 120-kilometer belt of lowlands adjacent to a hill range designated Shrine Target Primaris on all field charts and signals. 4 more dispersal sites were spread across a massive salt basin below Shrine Target Secundus, a line of steeple cliffs 1,500 kilometers to the west, and 3 more were placed to assault Shrine Target Tertius on a wide oceanic peninsula 2,000 kilometers to the south. The waves of landing ships came in under cover of pre-dawn light, tinting the dark undersides of the clouds red with their burners and attitude thrusters. As the sun came up, pale and weak, the lightning sky was thick with ships. The heavyweight troop carriers, glossy like beetles, the smaller munitions and supply lifters moving in pairs and trios, the quick cross-cutting threads of fighter escort and ground cover, some orbital bombardment, jagging
Hey, you was party leader, not me.
occasional careful stamp of a massive beam weapon softened the empty highlands above the seething dispersal fields. Down in the turmoil, men and machines marshaled out of black ships into the dawn light. Troop components formed columns or waiting groups, and army units ground forward, making their own roads along the lowlands, assembling into packs and advance lines on the churned, rolling grasses. The air was thick with exhaust fumes, the ground tank engines.
I fucked my brush, man.
And the crackle of vox chatter. Platoon-strength retinues set dispersal camps, lit fires, or were seconded to help erect the blast tents of the field hospitals and communication centers. Engineer units dug fortifications and defense battles. Munitorium supply details broke out the crates from the material ships and distributed assault equipment to collection parties from each assembling platoon. Amid the hue and cry, the Ministorum priesthood moved solemnly through their flock, chanting, blessing, swinging incense burners and singing unceasing hymns of valor and protection. Gaunt came down the bow ramp of his dropship into the early morning air and onto a wide mud plain and track due to earth. The noise, the vibration, the petrochemical smell was intense and fierce. Lights flashed all around, from campfires, from lanterns, from vehicle headlights, from the winking hazard lamps of landing ships, or the flicking torch poles of dispersal officers, directing disembarking troop columns or packs of offloading vehicles. He looked up at the highland slopes beyond, wide, rising hills thick with dry ochre bracken. Beyond them was the suggestion of crags and steeper summits. The target, Primaris. There, if the Vermilion level data was honest, lay the hopes and dreams of Lord High Militant General Dravier and his lackeys. The destiny of Ibram Gaunt and his ghosts, too. Further down the field,
Yes, Alvin? How do you do?
And disgorged infantry. The ghosts came out blinking, in platoon formation, gazing out at the rolling ochre-clad hills in a low, puffy cloud cover. Gaunt moved them up and out, under direction of the marshals, onto the rise that was their first staging post. Clearing the exhaust smog which choked the dispersal site, they got their first taste of Menazoid Epsilon. It was dry.
Yeah, dude, I will, don't worry.
Permeating scent of honeysuckle. At first, the sweet, cold smell was pleasing and strange, but after a few breaths, it became cloying and nauseating. Gaunt signaled his disposition and quickly received the command to advance as per sealed battle orders. The ghosts moved forward, rising up through the bracken, leaving countless trodden trails in their wake. The growth was hip-high and fragile as ash, and the troopers were encumbered by tripping roots and wiry sedge weeds. Gaunt led them to the crest of the hill, and then turned the regiment west, as he had been ordered. 2 kilometers back below them, on the busy dispersal field, burners flared.
It says I've got 3 people watching, but I'm not sure who's watching.
Shuddering the air and billowing up a storm of bracken fibers as they lifted almost impossibly to the cloud sky. 3 kilometers distant, Gaunt could see through his scope 2 regiments of Gordian Iron Guard forming up as they advanced from their landing point.
Oh, we've got 4 people. I wonder who's watching now.
Beyond them, the Vitrian Dragoons were advancing from their first staging. The rolling, hilly landscape was
Well, yes, you.
clusters of black dots marching up from the blasted acres of the dispersal site, forward through the scrub. By mid-morning, the parallel advancing regiments of Imperial Guard armor and infantry were pushing like fingers through the bracken and scree-marked slopes of the highlands. At the dispersal sites now left far behind, ships were still ferrying components of the vast assault down from orbit. Thruster roar rolled like faraway thunder around the steaming hills. They began to see the towers, 40-meter tall, irregular piles of jagged rock rising out of the bracken every 500 meters or so. Gaunt quickly passed the news on to command, and heard similar reports from the Voxcasters cross-channel traffic. There were lines of these towers all across the highland landscape. They looked like they had been piled from flat slabs, wide at the base, narrowing as they rose, and then wider and flat again at the top. They were all crumbling, mossy, haphazard, and in places time had tumbled some of their number over in wide spreads of broken stone, half hidden amidst the bracken. Gaunt wasn't sure if they were natural outcrops. Their space and linear form seemed to suggest otherwise. He was disheartened as he remembered the singular lack of data on Epsilon that had been available at the orbital preparatory briefings. Possibly a shrine world had been the best the intelligence Carter had to offer. The surface of the planet is covered in inexplicable stone structures, arranged in lines that verge on the main areas of ruins, the targets Primaris, Secundus, and Tertius. Gaunt sent McCall's scouting platoon ahead, around the breast of the hill through a line of mouldering towers and into the valley beyond. He flipped out the data slate which he had secreted in his storm-coat pocket for 2 days, and consulted the crystals data. Calling up Trooper Ruffland, he took the speaker horns of the fieldcaster on his back and relayed further orders. His units would scout ahead, and the Mordians, advancing in their wake, would lay behind until he signaled. It was now local noon. Turning back to his men, Gaunt saw Major Rawn nearby.
I know, dude.
His
I know.
gun hanging limply in his hands. Gaunt had all but refused to allow Rawn to join them, but the hexathedral medics had pronounced him fit. He was a shadow of his former self since the torture by the Jantine and that mysterious rogue monster which Larkin had shot. Gaunt missed the waspish, barbed attitude that had made Rawn a dangerous ally.
Jesus. Baguette.
Fagor
I'm just going to call you Baguette.
was here too. His life owed to Dorden. Fagor was a loose cannon now, an angry man with an axe to grind. He'd railed against the Jantine in the barracks and cursed that they were sharing this expedition. Gaunt feared what might happen if the ghosts and the Jantine crossed on Epsilon, particularly without Rawn sharp enough to keep his adjutant in line. What will happen, Gaunt decided, hearing Ferret's counsel in his head.
Ah. Vegeta is baguette in Polish.
Spilled from the chanters of the Tanith pipes and echoed across the curve of the valley.
So at least if I call you baguette, I don't have to feel bad.
They could do this. 2. Lord General Drevere's command, Leviathan, a vast, armoured, trundling fortress the size of a small city, crawled forward across the loamy soil of the lowland slope, overlooking one of the main dispersal sites for the Primaris target. At its heart, Drevere swung around in his leather command G-hammer. He was in a good mood. Thanks to his urgent requests, War Master Makarov had personally instructed him the command of the Epsilon offensive. The fool. Here lay the secret that the freak beast
Nice.
told him of on Fortis Binary. The reward. The prize that would win him everything. Drevere had spent 2 days reviewing the available data on Menazoid Epsilon before the drop. Little more than a moon compared to its vast partner Sigma. It was reckoned to be a shrine wheel to the dark.
Well, it's not just you staying up, it's me staying up as well. Come on, you've got this, dude.
Dominated the northern
And
arranged in
I want to get another handful with the brass on done before I go to bed.
had dug in to defend their cities on the primary world, but intelligence reports picked up hints of an unknown mass of defense established.
Wow.
It was clear that, though there was no obvious wealth or value to the moon world, the foe regarded it as significant. Why else would they have risked splitting their forces? Drevere had heard talk of simply capitulating Epsilon from orbit, but had fiercely vetoed the Navy plan. He wanted Epsilon taken on the ground, so that they might capture and examine whatever it was the enemy held in such regard. That was the authorized
Right, where's one of my crappy brushes?
Drevere, he knew that the fact the rebellious Gaunt had requested this theatre alone made it significant. Drevere readied himself. He knew how to use manpower. He had based his career upon it. He would use Gaunt now. The Commissar had not given up the priceless data, so they would instead use Gaunt to lead them to it. Drevere pulled on a lever to rotate his command hammer, speed reading the deposition reports from the repeater plates that hung around his station. He linked in with the command globes of Marshal Sendak and Marshal Tarantine, who were overseeing the assaults on target locations Secundus and Tertius, respectively. They reported their dispersal complete.
Oh, no.
Their forces in advance. No contact with any enemy thus far. The afternoon was half gone, and the first day with it. Drevere was unhappy that fighting had not yet begun at any of the 3 battlefronts, but he was gratified in the knowledge that he had supervised the landing of an expeditionary force of this size, divided between 3 targets, in less than a single day. He knew a few Imperial Guard commanders who could have done the same in treble that time. He selected other plates and surveyed the disposition of the army under his direct command, the Primaris invasion. The infantry regiments were down and advancing strongly from the dispersal sites, and the motorized armor were disembarking from their landing craft into the lower valleys. He was pushing on 3 prongs to encircle the ancient mountainside structures of Shrine Target Primaris, fanning his armor out to support 3 infantry advances, led by the Mordian to the west, the Latari to the east, and the Tanith to the south. So far, there had been no sign of an enemy to engage. No sign at all, in fact, that there were anything other than Imperium forces alive on Epsilon. Drevere took up a stylus and inscribed a short message on a data slate to Colonel Flens of the Jantine. Flens would be his eyes and ears on the ground, tailing the Tanith ghosts and standing ready to intercede. Gaunt's advance was the only one he was interested in. Drevere coded the message in Jantine combat cat and broadcasted to the patricians on a stammered box. Flens would not fail him. He sat back in his harness and allowed a smile to cross his thin lips. He knew this gambit would cost him, but he had lives enough to pay. The lives of the 50,000 infantry under his command here on Epsilon. He considered them a down payment on his apotheosis. He decided to take the opportunity to rest and meditate. The second day was dawning when he returned to his command hammock and overviewed the intelligence from the night. All of his units had advanced as expected until dark, and then established watch camps and stagings. At first light, they were moving again. The night had brought no sign of the foe, nor had Revere expected such news. His staff would have roused him immediately at the first shot fired. Chatter and industry filled the command globe beyond the circular guardrail surrounding his hammock deck. Navy officers and Unitorium aides mixed with guard tactical officials and members of his own staff, manning the artificers and codifiers, processing, analyzing, charting movement on the huge monolithic deployment map, a three-dimensional light shape projecting down to the domed roof. A sudden call rang through the deck. Marshal Tarantine reports Iskadian and Afghani units have engaged.
I know.
Fighting now at Shrine Target Tertius. First blood, Revere thought.
Don't remind me, dude. Come on.
Red indicator runes
I've got to
flashed
push
on
through.
the deployment map. Stains of telltale brown and crimson shone out to delineate firefight spread and range at the Tertius location. Enemy positions flashed into life as they were assessed, appearing as aggressive little yellow stars. He issued more orders, bringing the heavy artillery and tanks around to begin bombardment to cover Tarantine's line. Two more heavy fighting zones erupted on the map as the Secundus push suddenly ground hard into hidden enemy emplacements. A counter-bombardment opened up from the enemy forces. More stains, more yellow stars. Revere kept one eye fixed on the jinking.
Come on, you've got this.
With Mordian, Jantine, and Vitrian columns at its heels. The Primaris assault was unopposed so far.
It begins, Lord.
The voice said in his head. Revere looked up into the face of Imperial tactician Wayland. Wayland was a grizzled, bald man with a commanding frame and piercing eyes. He wore the black and red braid uniform of Makaroth's tactical advisor. But Revere had known who the man really was when he first met him. A spy, a watcher, an observer sent by Makaroth to supervise Revere's efforts. Your assessment, Madam? Revere said smoothly. The tactician scrutinized the deployment map.
We expected fierce resistance. I anticipate they have more than this up their sleeves.
Nothing yet here at Primaris. We expected this to be the worst. We.
Indeed.
Wayland seemed oblivious to Revere's sarcasm.
Not yet, but it will come. If this is the shrine world we fear it to be, their defense will be more indomitable and fanatical than we can imagine. Do not advance your forces too swiftly, Lord General, or you will render them vulnerable and overextended.
Revere wished he could tell the tactician exactly what he thought of his advice, but Wayland was part of Makaroth's military aristocracy, and an insult would be counterproductive. He wanted to shout, "I've dispersed this invasion faster and more efficiently than any commander in the field, and you dare advise me to slow?" But he simply nodded, biting his tongue there. Wayland sat on the guardrail and sighed reflectively.
It's been a long time for us, eh, Hector?
Revere looked at him crossly.
Long time. What do you mean?
Wayland smiled at him.
The heat of combat. We were both sluggers once.
Welcome,
Last action I
welcome.
saw was against the accursed Eldar on Ondamax. 20 years passed. Now we're data slate watchers, plate pushers. Command is an honorable venture, but sometimes I miss the sweat and toil of combat.
Revere licked his lips at the delicious thought which had just come to him.
I can use any able-bodied, willing fighting man. Wayland, do you want to get out there?
Wayland looked startled for a moment, then grinned suddenly, getting up.
I never refuse such an opportunity. The combat technique of this much-celebrated Tanith regiment fascinates me. I'm sure the Tactical Council could incorporate many new ideas from close observation of their stealth methods. With your permission, I'd gladly join them.
You're so damn transparent, Revere thought sullenly. You want to see for yourself, don't you? But he also knew he couldn't argue. To deny an Imperial tactician now might risk compromising his plan. I can deal with you later, he decided.
But you can't deploy in the field as an observer. I could always use an eye on the ground.
With your permission,
Whedon said, making to leave.
I'll take a chimera from the reserve and move up the line. I have a detail of bodyguards who can act as a fire team squad. Naturally, I'll report all findings to you.
Naturally.
Gravier agreed humorously.
I'll enter your identifier on the chart. Your battle code will be what?
Whalen seemed to think for a moment.
How about my old unit call sign? Eagle Shard.
Gravier noted it and passed the details to his aide.
Good hunting, tactician.
He said, as the man left the command dome. 3. Gaunt picked up from the inscription that communications officer Rafflin had made of the intercepted Foxbirds.
Been anything to you, sir?
I logged it yesterday afternoon. Gaunt nodded. It was a message in Jantine combat tank. Watchful of Makaroth's agencies, he had instructed Rafflin to his Foxcast unit open to listen for all battlefield traffic. The message was from Gravier to friends, a direct order to shadow the ghosts. Gaunt rubbed his chin. Slowly the enemies were showing their hand. He looked ahead, up at the high mountain pass, choked with bracken, and its lines of slumping towers. He was tempted to send Rawn back down the slope, to mine the way in advance of the Jantine at their heels. But when all was said and done, they were on the same side. Word had come that the fighting had opened at the other 2 target sites, heavy and bloody. There was no telling what they would encounter up ahead at a thin altitude. He dared not drive back the units which might be the only forces.
He's getting tired, man. I'm getting tired. I'm having to be careful I don't make no mistakes.
And consulted several pages of Colonel Zoran had written. Carefully, with uncertainty, he composed a message in the Vitriol battlefield language, using the code words Zoran had told him. Then he had Rafflin send it. Speaking in tongue, sir, ironically, using the Tanith's own war dialect that Gaunt had made sure he had learned early on. Many of the regiments used their own languages or codes for internal messages. On the battlefield, secrecy was imperative in box commands, and Gravier couldn't know Gaunt had a working knowledge of Jantine combat camp. Gaunt called up Sergeant Blaine. Take the 7th platoon and function as a rear guard, he told Blaine directly.
Expecting a hindquarter strike then?
Asked Blaine, puzzled. McCall's scouts have covered the hill line. The enemy won't be sneaking round on us. Not the given enemy, Gaunt said. I want you watching for the Jantine who are following us up. Our code word will be Ghostmaker. Given from me to you, or you back to me, it will indicate the Jantine have made a move. I don't want to be fighting our own, but it may come to that. When you hear the word, do not shrink from the deed. If you signal me, I will send everything back to support you. As far as I'm concerned, the Jantine are as much our foe as the things that dwell up here.
Understood.
Blaine said, looking darkly at his commander. Corbeck had briefed the senior men well after Gaunt's unlocking of the crystal. They knew what was at stake, and were keeping the thought both paramount and away from their men, who had enough to concern them. Gaunt had a particular respect for the gruff, workmanlike Blaine. He was as gifted and loyal an officer as Corbeck, McCall, or Leron, but he was also dependable and solid. Almost despite himself, Gaunt found himself offering Blaine his hand. They shook. Blaine realized the weight of the duty, the potentially terrible demands.
Emperor go with you, sir.
He said, as he broke the grip and turned to retreat down the bracken slope. And may he watch over you, Gaunt returned. Nearby, Milo saw the quiet exchange. He shook spit from the chances of his Tanith pipes and prepared to play again. This is it, he thought. The commissar expects the worst. Sergeant McCall's scouts were returning from the higher ground. Gaunt joined them to hear their report. I think it's best if you see it yourself, McCall said simply, and gestured back at the heights. Gaunt spread the fire teams in 3 platoons along the width of the valley slope, and then moved forward to McCall.
Yeah, I'll stream tomorrow.
By now, all the ghosts rubbed the absorbent fabric of their
Yeah.
clothes.
Another stream tomorrow.
Dust and they blended into the ground cover. Gaunt
Maybe a small one on Friday. And then another one.
The colour of Gaunt's cloak with a scrub of ashy bracken.
Hmm.
Gaunt removed his cap and edged forward, trying to hang the cloak around him as deftly as the Tanit scout. Behind them, there were 2,000 ghosts on the bracken thick mountainside, but their commanding officer could see none of them. He reached the rise and borrowed McCall's scope as they bellied down in the fern and the dust. He hardly needed the scope. The rise they were ascending dropped away, and a cliff face rose vertically ahead of them.
Yeah, man, I know.
10,000 meters.
I get about 7 hours.
The milky blue granite face was carved into steps like a ziggurat. A vast steeple formation of weather-worn stories, rows of archways and slumped blocks.
Like, I didn't fall asleep till about 4 a.m. today. And I woke up at 10:30, so 6.5 hours sleep ain't bad.
A temple, a dead high,
He's got no more bronze on him.
a vile corruption heaped up every corner.
Let's have a
Every
look.
dark alcove and hidden recess. I don't like the look of it, McCall said flatly.
Bronze is done on you.
Gaunt smiled
No, it's not done on
and
you.
consulted his own data slate.
No, wait, no, that's going to be...
We don't want to approach it directly. We need to sweep around.
No,
the
we'll do that,
left
bro.
front of the valley line.
We'll do that,
Gaunt
bronze.
scopes down to the left. The carved granite structure extended away beyond the curve of the vale, and several of the stalking lines of towers marched up the bracken slopes to meet it, as if they were feelers spread out from the immense shrine itself. Beyond and higher, you could now see towers of blue granite in the clouds, spires, steeples, buttresses. This was just the outskirts of an ancient necropolis, a city long dead that had been raised by inhuman hands before the start of recorded time. The honeysuckle scent in the air was becoming a stench. Mark's level chatter over the microbead in his ear told him that his men were starting to succumb to a vague, indefinable nausea. You want to go left? McCall asked. But that's not in accord with the order of battle. I know. The Lord General will be furious if you divert from the given advance. I have my own orders, Gaunt said, tapping his data slate. And the Emperor will love you for your loyalty, McCall shook his head. Sir, we were told to assault this place directly, and we will, McCall. Just not here. McCall nodded. How far down? A kilometer or two. The crystal spoke of a dome. Find it for me. Gladly, McCall said. You know that if we alter our advance, it will give the Jantine dogs more reason to come for us. I know, Gaunt said. More than ever, he appreciated the way his senior officers had accommodated the truth of their endeavor. They knew what was at stake and what the real dangers were. McCall, the Corporal Baru, led the advancing ghosts along the top of the valley, just under the crest, and past the threatening, tower-haunted steps of the graven hillside. Scout Trooper Thark was the first to spot him. He voxed back to the command group. A dome, a massive bulbous dome swelling from the living rock of the cliff face, impossibly carved from granite. Gaunt moved up to see it for himself. It was like some vast stone onion, 1,000 meters in diameter, sunk into the stepped rock wall around it, a surface inscribed with millions of obscure sigils and marks. Thark was also the first to die. A storm of autocannon rounds whipped up the slope, exploding bracken into dust, spitting up soil and punching him into 4 or 5 bloody parts. At the queue, other weapon placements in the step alcoves of the facing cliff opened fire, raining lasfire, bullets, curls of plasma down the ghosts. The answering fire laced a spider's web of lazlite, tracer lines, and firewash between the sides of the valley. The dying began. 4. Marshal Gol Sendak, the so-called Ravager of Genestock Gamma, had abandoned his command Leviathan to lead his forces from the front. He rode a Demon Rust battle tank of the 4th Pettit Regiments, heading a fast-moving armored phalanx that was smashing its way across the rocky escarpments below the weathered stone structures of shrine target Secundus. Laying down a ceaseless barrage, they broke through 2 lines of crumbling curtain walls and into the lower perimeters of the shrine structure itself. Wide, rubble-strewn slopes faced them, dotted with the lines of those infernal towers. Sendak walked to the Udino infantry at his tail and urged them to follow him in. Fire as heavy as he had ever known blazed down.
Right, I think that's going to do it for me tonight.
Sendak felt dry, stinging,
I shall see you all tomorrow.
It was beginning to get to him like it was getting to his men. He felt a wetness heavy his moustache and Fresh blood smeared his grey cloth sleeve.
Right, good night, y'all.
And
Take care.
his ears.
And
Looking
I'll
around
be
in the
seeing you all
green
tomorrow.
interior of the tank, he saw all the crew suffering spontaneous nosebleeds or were retching and hacking blood. There was a vibration singing in the air, low.
take care. Nice meeting you both.
Sendak swung the tank's periscope around.